Any old man's beard in that one?
Turn my microphone on. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to this council meeting. Just a reminder at the front end, when you speak, turn your microphone off, and when you stop speaking, when you speak, turn your microphone on, and when you stop speaking, turn it off. It just means that the audio isn't so much better for the people that are on Zoom. Okay, so we've got Carmen is on Zoom. We've got an apology from Alexa and Michael Deaker, and an apology from Councillor Robertson for early departure, but we'll be rejoining on Zoom. Yep.
Councillor Hope hasn't actually joined yet.
Councillor Hope hasn't actually joined yet, but we're expecting her at some stage. So I note those apologies, seconded by Gary. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Public forum. There is no public forum today. Moving on to item 3, confirmation of the agenda. I'm not aware of any proposed changes. So moving on to item 4, which is conflict of interest. And this is just a reminder to all members that they need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative and any private or other external interests they might have. Moving on to, is there anyone want to declare a conflict on? Carmen has just joined. Is there any, at this stage, anyone wants to declare any interest on any items on the agenda? Hilary.
Sorry, I was just waving at Carmen.
Oh.
So can I just check the agenda?
Kate.
We did have Doug here earlier. We're holding him off until the end, or
Correct.
we're not doing that earlier?
Yes,
No.
yeah, correct.
Cool.
Yep. So that's Doug Craig. Yes, yep.
Can I raise another issue too?
This is to confirmation of the agenda.
Well, just for that, this is the second occasion where my council minutes have not arrived prior to me walking in. So we've had this problem now 2 times in a row, so I'm alerting you to that. So it should be meant to be couriered out on a Friday.
They were couriered Friday.
Yeah.
But I will
They're still not there.
double check
Okay.
at our end.
So
Okay.
there's a problem at this end.
Oh, let's look into it.
We'll
Look into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Okay, confirmation of the minutes. This is item 5. Council will consider minutes of the previous council meetings as a true and correct record with or without changes. I'll move that the minutes of the 29th of September 2021 council meeting be noted as a true and accurate record, seconded by Michael Laws. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Now, I failed at the front end to welcome our new manager of comms and engagement, Joe Gaylor. Maybe stand up, Joe, so we all, welcome, Joe. I understand that it was probably your words, not mine, a couple of decades ago that you were last in a council, an ORC council meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was a reporter for the ODT.
Excellent.
In the early 90s, around.
Awesome. Excellent. Hey, well, it's great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so moving on to item 6, which is actions. If you want to flick over to page 11, I think it is. Down through that list, action there, the second one down, the letter went to the Mayor a day or two ago, as per the is listed on the agenda under the Chairperson's report with regards to public transport. I have a letter to go to Port Otago with regards to congratulating them on their performance over the last 12 months under pretty trying conditions. So I will get onto that in the next day or two. And the only other item there is, it's due in December. That's the Manuhiri Care Governance decision-making process. But was there anything that any general manager wanted to mention with regards to the action list? Or you're all up to date, no doubt? That looks good. Any questions from councillors? Kate.
Just on the last one, it's cheapest, it's last one on page 11, which is the bicultural work. That's got a date of the 30th of August. Is that intended really to be for the next triennium rather than for this council? Because by the
30th of April.
yeah, I mean I had thought, and I just want to really check that we were going to get something in place for this council as soon as possible.
Amanda,
Yeah.
please.
We're aiming for February, March, but it's just a bit dependent on ability to host at the other end.
Okay, so that will be completed.
Yes,
That's a completion date rather than the start date. Okay, thank you.
Cool. No other queries? Okay, moving on to item 7, matters for council consideration. This is the annual report 2021 adoption. We've got obviously attached the annual report, and we've also got welcome Sarah and welcome Nick. We've also got a draft representation letter, just noting that on the 14th of October, the annual report was considered by Audit and Risk, and Audit and Risk resolved that or recommended that it be presented to council for adoption at today's meeting. The recommendations listed there 1, 2 and 3. Nick, Sarah, is there anything that you would like to make comment on, and particularly in reference the Audit and Risk meeting where there was we had audit representation from Deloitte, or the auditor from Deloitte, and they raised a couple of issues, one being the port revaluation, property revaluation, and the other one was around, I suppose, ongoing deficits and the accumulative effect of that. There were a couple of things that I can recall, but did you want to make any comment on any general matters or those two matters?
No, not really. Obviously, the auditors go through this in a lot more detail with Audit and Risk. They did raise a couple of things. One of the key things was around the port valuation. So council received the draft or the preliminary financial result back at the Finance Committee in August. But that was, although it had all the operating expenditure and revenue in there, it wasn't complete in that the valuations weren't completed by that date, so those weren't included. So investment property revaluations and the revaluation of the port shares are the main changes from the preliminary result that you saw earlier. So now that's been completed and it's in the full annual report. The auditors have indicated going through their work, there's no matters that will lead them to issue a modified audit opinion. But they did note, as they do every year, the port revaluation is a big number, and it is quite sensitive to movements in port performance and to underlying assumptions that are used, particularly around the weighted average cost of capital. So they always point that out. It's just something to note. Although it's a big increase this year, it could just as easily go the other way. So that's just something to be aware of. But apart from that, they went through with audit. From here, there's a representation letter, which part of the approval is for the chair and CE to sign that. That then goes back to the auditors, and once they've received that, they will issue their audit opinion, and then we'll produce the final printed audit annual report.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah, is there anything you want to add?
No.
Okay, cool. Questions, queries? Hilary, then Kate.
Just
Microphone, please. Thank you.
The auditors did point out that for the last 5 years we've overspent our budget, and we've overspent our budget for a variety of reasons. So we're sort of looking into where they come from and how much of that is things that we don't budget for, but we keep spending, and which of them, whether there's any way we can put in the budget things that we are going to expect to spend because they drew to our attention that it wasn't the right thing to do to keep overspending our budget by millions of dollars. So we just have a look at that. Is that a fair, do you want to comment on that? Is that a fair rendition of?
No.
Yeah, they did comment on balancing the budget. You will recall back in the August Finance Committee, the financials that we put in there. There was a significant operating deficit variance to budget. So we did budget for a deficit this year. But the actual deficit was significantly bigger. They commented on that, and then obviously they showed the last few years where that's been a similar trend, not to the extent that it was this year. This year was a lot bigger, but that prompted the discussion around there are some things in there that we don't budget for, as Councillor Calvert mentioned, things like one of the costs that we had this year was there was the best part of $1 million worth of cost around going to the Environment Court that wasn't budgeted. So whether or not some of those sort of costs or appeals costs could be budgeted and should be budgeted is something that we need to have a look at, and then need to look at what some of those other variances were. They were outlined, the overspend areas, in that Finance Committee report. But the question is whether some of those could be budgeted better and should be funded up front. When they're not budgeted, means that additional deficit gets reserve funded.
Slightly on the same point, or slightly different tangent. In the message from our chair and chief executive on page 3 of the, or page 19 of the paper, there's a paragraph there that says quick fix changes to our water plan were introduced this year. This is a financial year that started in June 2020, I think. Is that correct? And those things happened the months before that, as in April and March, I think. And so, and it goes to us what story we're telling, and should we have budgeted for that? Because if it was in March and April that we knew it was happening, perhaps we should have. And as someone who this is sort of coming through the chair, being our story, I would like to be slightly more accurate about it. The nuance is right, that we did have a whole lot of costs in there, but it didn't happen in this particular financial year, as in that they were called up in the last financial year. Or have I got that dates wrong?
They were called up
in March and April, I think.
March 2020.
Yeah, but this is June 2020 to July 2020 to June 2021, in which case while the nuance is the same, but it does come to whether we should have budgeted, because we did know that they were happening at that stage. Does that make sense? I don't know who writes your chair and CEO's report, so it's yours to own you too. Well, but I would personally like to see that.
Yeah, my reaction would be, it would overlap both, the tail end of the 20 year and the beginning of the 21 year.
Using the word introduction is incorrect.
We did promise to do in November before that, to do that, so we knew it was happening, didn't we? We promised the minister that we would.
Yeah, a bit of it is timing. If you go back, if what you're saying is we knew that the additional costs were coming in March, April of 2020, and then we didn't have them in the budget that started on 1 July 2020, that's quite correct, because the budget for the starting on 1 July was in the process of being set prior to that. We were already in the process of having done a draft annual plan, looked at what our increases were going to be in various things. Now, if something came up, we could potentially change it very late in the budgeting piece. But there's also the issue that even though those decisions were happening in March or April, we still didn't really have any certainty on what the financial impact and cost was going to be. So there's no guarantee, just because we know now as the whole of last year has progressed, that that's what the cost was. Back in March and April the year before, we didn't know that.
Yep.
So that's where it gets very difficult. There's a timing issue you've got to do, and to a certain extent, your budget will be your best estimate at the time based on the assumptions and the knowledge you've got at that point in time.
Thank you.
Apologies. I think I was agreeing with Hilary's point, but I was actually saying that wording, as far as that introduction of those, they weren't introduced in this year. and it's a problem. They were introduced the previous year. And while it reflects what we perhaps could have done better in the budgeting, it's actually that sentence
You're
doesn't.
talking about the last sentence in the third last paragraph?
Quick fix changes to our water plan were introduced this year. They were introduced in the previous financial year. And so it's just telling that story in a consistent way as we go through.
I think you can have it either way. And I guess the reason why I'm saying I think you can have it either way is because I'm going to not in the room, but if my memory serves me correctly, there was quite a delay between council adopting those changes and then the process being notified by the EPA. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not concerned either way. If you wanted to change it, that's fine. But at the same time, I think it's equally as accurate to say it was that year.
Okay.
Whichever way, the last sentence is correct.
Yeah. Look, I take your point. I'll follow that up with Sarah and settle on, if there needs to be a change. But I take your point. Any other queries? If Kevin,
I'm just happy to move.
Happy to move. So you're moving
3.
What? Yeah, 1, 2, and 3. That we receive the report. 2, that we approve and adopt the annual report for the year ending 30 June 2021, and we authorise the Chair and Chief Executive to sign the annual report and representation letter on behalf of Council. Can I just check that Carmen can hear us?
Is she here?
Hello, I can
She's
hear
on
you.
Zoom. Hello, Carmen.
Hello, Chair Noon. I can hear you. I can hear you very well.
I don't
Can you
think we've
hear
got
me?
Carmen.
We haven't got Carmen.
I don't believe so. Anyway, just on behalf of Council, I just want to acknowledge Nick and his team for the extraordinary amount of work that's been completed to get to this point. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we never see, and we really appreciate the fine job you've done, and to be able to get past the auditors is no mean feat. So well done. So if you can pass that on to your team, Nick and Sarah, that'd be much appreciated. Brian, would you like to speak?
Yes, I mean, we've had questions, so we now have discussion. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. I mean, we've had a focus on the financials. There was obviously a lot that occurred in this particular annual plan year. As Councillor Wilson has alluded to, the plan changes 7, plan change 8, the work on the RPS. We employed an additional 16 staff for regulatory relating to water. We had some good news in relation to bus patronage and the public satisfaction rated highly. We gained an additional $6 million government funding, which we use for flood protection and jobs for nature. We've endeavoured to improve our relationships with iwi. So a lot of good work has been going on. That being said, there's still a stack of work to do. For example, the water quality issues. I see the map that was there. There's still a significant number of red dots. The water quantity issues. We've had our issues, for example, the Manuhera care. We're endeavouring to do our best with biosecurity. We've got some significant challenges, for example, wallabies, for example, rabbits, and we're trying our best on biodiversity. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Michael.
I think ever since I've been on this council, I've raised the number one pest and our work or not on it and its effectiveness. I'd note that on page 18 of the annual report, under the heading Biosecurity Pest Management, we're talking about, or have talked about over the previous year, the boosting of compliance and enforcement issues related to rabbits. And I have to say I'm very pleased to see the council abandoning its previous policy of supine surrender and instead becoming much more proactive in terms of trying to combat the rabbit menace in areas. There'll be a debate over whether or not we put enough money into that over the next annual plan and long-term plan. I think that's a debate that will continue at the next annual plan time. But I do note something very important here that I think is worth drawing to the attention both of ourselves and of a wider public, and that is of the 331 rabbit inspections undertaken in the previous 12 months, just over half were compliant. So that means that almost half the properties that we visited, and we wouldn't have visited anywhere near a majority of properties, the rabbit menace was such that we were simply losing the battle. And I want to draw again to the attention of this table that we aren't losing the battle, we have lost it, and now it's just the question of how much we've lost it by. So I do want to draw that to your attention because it is a passionate plea that I will continue to make for greater resources put into a proactive stance from this council to combat rabbits. I've just had my cat bring home the first of 10 rabbits it's gathered in the last month, which tells me that in my neck of the woods, it's pretty clear that it's probably killing more than we are. And I don't think we should leave it to stray cats to do the job, or my cat in particular. We need to boost our presence in this area. And I just think that's an important, very important statistic to highlight as to how bad the problem is.
You, further speakers? Kevin?
As a for moving the motion.
Just hang on a wee bit. I just want to make sure there are no other speakers. Good. Kevin, right to reply?
Yeah, and certainly, Mr. Donnelly, just to reflect further on what Chair Noon has said, look, again, delivered an annual report within the constraints of time where many other organisations haven't, so that's been superb. The work you've done with our groups on the way through, keeping us informed, has been absolutely spot on, so that's a whole team effort. Look, the annual report did highlight some increased expenditure that we were no one wants, but in reality they've been well explained, and we're of an understanding why those have happened. We are in a growth phase to meet central government demands and the expectations of the people that we serve, the people of Otago. So that is part of the pain we bear at the moment, is that increased costs. But we are, as a group, I'm sure we are as a group, committed to correctly resource our staff and this organisation. So that's something we're going to have to work with all the way through, but continue, as we expressed this morning in groups, that we have to ensure that we have efficiencies when we're doing this expansion. So expansion is really good if it's doing the job, but we need to have efficiency as that goes along. So keep those good figures coming to Mr. Donnelly and team in the way that you do it. Very well presented, and thanks very much for your work. I'd like to put that vote, sir.
Thank you. I'll put those three recommendations all together. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Nick, Sarah. Moving on to item 7.2, the Mana Tamana update. So this is a report that was provided, or provides an opportunity for council to reaffirm its shared commitment to its partnership with local iwi and the Treaty of Waitangi, to share an updated Mana Tamana terms of reference with council, and to seek agreement to ask Mana Tamana to consider expanding the membership to all councillors. We have also got attached at the back of this report is the reviewed terms of reference, and also you'll remember that I had made the comment at the 14th of September council meeting with regards to ensuring that our relationship building with our partners, our iwi partners, continues to be, strengthened, continues to be a genuine relationship, a valued relationship, and a committed relationship. So we've got a number of recommendations there, 1 to 6, but first we will go to questions. Marion, and then Kate. I'll just get you to turn your microphone on. Thanks, Marion. No, all good.
In the recommendations, it says notes that Mana Tamana operates on the basis of consensus. I'd really like to understand if the council understands what that means. I want to check people's understanding of the word consensus. Is it 7-5? What is it?
Well, my understanding of consensus, and we've all sat, well, when I say all, a number of us have sat in Mana Tamana meetings and understand how discussions are progressed and how decisions are made. And essentially it's a conversation that ends up at a point of agreement around the table. That's my understanding of the way it works at Mana Tamana. And I don't believe there's going to be any change going forward. That's the way it's been in the past. That's the way it'll be in the future.
That would thrill my heart. It is different from what we do in this council chamber, and we have to acknowledge that.
And to be fair, I suppose that's why that recommendation is in there, because it's just that the system is a bit is that way because that's the way it is for that relationship. Kate, then Michael.
I'm concerned about, and this is why my question, not concerned. The question I asked earlier about the bicultural competency, giving it an end date means that we think we've finished something, and that concerns me. I think it's really good to have a start date, and that's why I thought it would be earlier in the actions register. I don't think that that's something that we finish. And to that end, I would like to think that this is nuanced. When we talk about bicultural competency as a journey that we're just, some people will just be beginning. People like, I know Alexa spent a substantial amount of time training in the last wee while and be well ahead of me, and it wouldn't be hard. But I would like to think that we don't nuance as something that's about getting through the first stage and thinking we're finished. I just want to pick up on the point that Marion also made as a question. There is nothing in standing orders that stops us from doing consensus politics. And having come from a previous council where Dave Cull led us to consensus regularly, although 14 well, and that is about us being prepared sometimes to stop and not making a decision until we can get to that point, and that's just something we can do. So, standing orders doesn't stop us laying something on the table, and I encourage those that wish to have consensus that we do consider using that more often, potentially.
Sorry, I'm just checking, Carmen, whether you can hear or not, or whether you're getting a lot of feedback and you're having difficulty in hearing.
She told me she could hear you, Andrew. I'm hearing and hear.
I can hear everybody. I can hear Hillary. I can hear Kate. I can hear all the discussions going on.
Senegal, your way.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you. So I'm here. We might be far away, but we're in the room.
Excellent. Thanks, Carmen. Just let me know, or let Di know when you want to speak. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no.
Just a question. Oh, sorry. Question on the bicultural learning. I see we are looking at setting something up for early next year.
Yes.
I'm assuming there will be a cost to that, and I'm wondering, would it make more sense to do that after the next election, given we're in an election year, and why not start a new term, because we may have a change of councillors.
I suppose my reaction there, Gary, is that over the last 6 or 8 weeks, I've signalled from the chair and with a focus on lifting our game in terms of bicultural competency. So there's a commitment to do something in this triennium. So that would be my reaction. Yes, there would be a cost. I don't know what that would be, but I just believe this term we really haven't done a lot in that space. We visited the marae. We were invited down to the marae early after the 2019 elections, and we were hosted there. And that was all valuable time that we spent down on the marae. Good learning experience, etc. But probably since then we haven't done a lot. So I suppose what I'm suggesting, I feel that there is a need for us to continue on that journey, and I think this group needs to do more in that space during this term. Yeah. So I don't know the answer about the cost, but I'm not sure whether.
That's cool. Okay, thank you. And the other question was just around if you're looking to, or the suggestion is to expand from 6 to all councillors. Does that then make does that formalise how those meetings could or should be held, and that could they be held in the public arena as opposed to in what may be, I suppose, a private or workshop type manner?
Don't know the answer to that, but happy to raise that question, whether they'd be held in public. I think that's something we would want to pose that question to our partners before we formed a view. It would be obviously a joint decision if we were to head down that path.
I suppose from a transparency perspective for the wider community, then the position of the partnership, and if the more upfront the discussions held by the parties could be, possibly the better for the understanding of the community beyond where we're at. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'm happy to raise that point at our next Mana Tamana meeting on the 9th of November. Okay. Michael?
Is this question time or is this debate time?
This is question time.
Right. Okay. In the recommendation, that's recommendation 2. Recommendation is reaffirms councillors' commitments to ORC's partnership with iwi and the Treaty of Waitangi. I've read the Mana Tamana document that's attached to this, the terms of reference, which interestingly doesn't mention the word partnership at all. So therefore, I'm quite keen on getting a definition of what partnership is, what it means. It's in the recommendation, but it's not in the terms of reference. And in fact, there's nothing in the terms of reference about a partnership. It's called a working relationship, not a partnership.
I know this may not satisfy your view, but I think the partnership comes from above in terms of the treaty. It talks about treaty partners, etc. I accept what you've suggested and what you've noted in here in the terms of reference. No mention of a partnership, but I would also note that we've had a relationship or partnership.
Actually, you use the word relationship in the terms of reference.
Okay, we've had a relationship and partnership with Mana Whenua for I think about 18 years through an MOU which has commitments from both parties, and then more recently in the last decade we've had that governance representation as well. So whether you call it a partnership, I'm reasonably relaxed about it, but my belief is that language or that term has come from the treaty. It's a treaty principle. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah.
What's a treaty principle?
Partnership.
Yeah.
So what's it to do with our relationship to do with this? It's not in the terms of reference. And the reason I'm asking the question is there's a lot of difference between the word relationship and partnership, as your husband or wife will tell you. You're in a partnership with your husband and wife. You're not in a non-binding relationship. There's a difference. And so it makes a difference here too. We're either married or we're not.
Yeah, I think I can recall a very similar conversation we had a few months ago when.
But it makes it difficult to support the recommendation when the terms of reference, I have no difficulties with at all.
Yeah.
I do have a lot of difficulty with the concept of we're in a partnership.
I don't want to get into a debate about, I think I said this last time when we had this conversation about what the treaty says and it doesn't say, but on the basis that it's a principle that's very much at the fore of the Treaty of Waitangi, I don't think we're in any position to start debating whether, and I know you're not debating the treaty right here at the moment, but you're debating the point that, is the word partnership appropriate in terms of this relationship? I think that's really what you're saying. I'll go to Marion and then Hilary. And this is sort of question time, but I think it's important that we settle this. And
just an attempt to help out.
Thank you.
The word in here.
Just your microphone, thanks, Marion.
Sorry.
Cool.
The word in here talks a lot about relationship strengthening and collaboration. So I went in to have a look at a collaborative partnership. They are agreements and actions made by consenting organisations to share resources to accomplish a mutual goal. And I think that's what I take from this particular meaning. The word collaboration comes through quite often inside this document, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hilary, thank you.
Since, as you say, you neither want to debate this nor want, I think, to die in a ditch over these particular words, how about changing number 2 to commitment to ORC's relationship with iwi and the Treaty of Waitangi? If no one wants to die in a ditch over putting partnership in, why do we have it in there? And could we not have relationship like as in the other document?
Sarah, did you want to just, with regards to the emphasis, Sarah, did you just want to make a comment with regards to the emphasis of partnership within these recommendations and the relationship between that term and our MOU, even though it's not within the body of the MOU, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, just in relation to the treaty, so if you refer to the treaty, the principles of the treaty then become relevant. One of those principles is partnership, another is participation, another one is active protection, reciprocity. There are a number of principles. So when the courts have looked at the way that partnership is talked about, and this is guidance from the Waitangi Tribunal, it's well established that the concept of partnership describes the relationship between treaty partners, and partnership can usefully be regarded as the overarching tenet from which the other principles have been derived. The Court of Appeal has referred to the treaty relationship as akin to a partnership, emphasising a duty on parties to act reasonably, honourably and in good faith. And also the Tribunal has emphasised that partnership doesn't necessarily mean equal either. So equity becomes important in the discussion of partnership as well. My only advice to you would be that there have been significant discussions in my time here. The MOU was signed a very long time ago, but since then there have been significant discussions, and the conversation has always been framed as a partnership. And that goes back to when Tahu Portaki was with us on Mana Tamana, and also to the request for the 2 members we have on the Strategy and Planning Committee. So partnership to me is already embedded inside of the work we do together and the relationship, and I have always understood that to mean standing together side by side and having a status of relationship that is not the same as all of the other stakeholders that we have. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Sarah.
So my question, I obviously didn't get my question quite right. I wasn't questioning what the Treaty of Waitangi says. And I was suggesting we leave the reference to the Treaty of Waitangi in there. And I wasn't questioning what our relationship with iwi was. We leave the words put the words relationship with iwi in there. And that relationship has developed and matured over the years. I was suggesting taking out the word partnership with iwi and replacing it with relationship with iwi, which over the years has developed, I'm sure, as Sarah has said. So I'm not questioning what that relationship is, and I wasn't questioning what the Treaty of Waitangi says, but leaving the word partnership out, since it is incorporated in however it is incorporated by the courts from time to time in the treaty, and the relationship which incorporates a variety of different things, one of which may well be a partnership sort of relationship, but if we just describe it as relationship with iwi, which incorporates a variety of things over the years and might well be changing in the future, we avoid having any argument about partnership if we don't have that word in there, because it is in the other bits anyway. So my question was, can we just change that to relationship where it says partnership?
To move an amendment that would...
I do move that. I mean, well, has somebody moved it?
Not yet.
Well, then I move it with that change.
Yeah, so just
please
hold that thought for a moment. Sarah, you'd like to reply to Hilary?
I think my best advice to you is that the word partnership is important, and I would just consider the ramifications of changing the word partnership to relationship. I think it does mean something different, and I understand your point about that it's embedded inside of the treaty. But equally, you could argue that because it is embedded inside of the treaty and you're including the treaty, that partnership is the appropriate word.
Thank you.
Can I speak?
No. We're just no. So because it hasn't been moved, I just want you to hold on to that thought in terms of an amendment. Okay.
No, I was going to move it differently from the recommendation.
Yeah,
I want to move it.
I realise that.
I don't want to move an amendment. I want to move a different resolution.
Well,
it isn't an amendment yet because it hasn't been moved.
Well, therefore,
so I'm.
Can I move an amendment to the original motion to go back to the original?
Look, we're going to deal with several more questions, because I think there are several more questions yet, and then I will go back to and I'll look for a mover, and then that mover could well be whoever. We'll just see who gets their hand up first, but we'll go back to.
It was serious, by the way.
No.
It was a serious comment I made about an amendment.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll come back to you. There was a question over here and I can't think.
Gretchen.
Gretchen, sorry. Big pardon.
Sorry, it was just not really. Well, it's kind of a question. When we were discussing this point before about relationships and what the terms of reference say, it does say on 0.5.1, to fulfil the objectives of the group, both Kaitahu and the council are mutually committed, and then to give effect to the Treaty of Waitangi and the key principles determined by the courts. So it does actually say in the terms of reference. Heard what Hilary was saying, but I guess referring to the relationships, there is specific reference to those principles as well. And as we heard, they're the 3 Ps. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further question, Kate, and then Kevin?
Question for anyone who's better on these things than I am, so Widefield. The use of the term Treaty of Waitangi as opposed to Te Tiriti in this context, I'm just wondering, should we be using Te Tiriti Waitangi instead, because it is different, and this is a mana to mana meeting where we start putting in te reo, but my understanding is that those 2 documents are a wee bit different, and I want to know which one we should really be referencing in our motion, or we put / both of them and we can talk to both of them.
Well, my reaction would be that this MOU has been passed, or mana to mana have reviewed it and considered it.
Recommendations.
Big pardon?
Have they reviewed these recommendations?
No, they've reviewed the MOU.
Oh, the MOU,
Okay,
yeah.
so all I'm saying is that Kate's question about whether,
Right.
her question relates to using Te Reo and various parts of the document. And all I'm,
Actual, no. It's
Okay.
the wording of the treaty, because
Yes.
the versions is different.
okay,
Yeah.
I would have accepted
Either.
if Mana to Mana have looked at this. As far as I'm concerned, it's not for us to consider what you're suggesting in terms of whether the treaty should be worded in its current form or another form.
Can I answer the question though? Because
Your
Kate's
question,
asked a question. Kate, the courts have, under public law, interpreted the Maori version of the treaty to have the greatest status.
Indeed.
And the reason that they have included that is because in association with, I think, the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, that the treaty should always be interpreted in the partner who was in the least powerful position.
It's Aboriginal legal terms.
That's right. So as a consequence of that, they haven't, back in the Lands Act of 1987, the SOE case, they interpreted that way anyhow. But Kate raises a good point. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't have Treaty of Waitangi / Te Tiriti o Waitangi as,
then my answer would be the same to what I've given to Kate.
Yeah. What do they say?
Well, no. We've been through a process. This is a ratification of the process. It's a bit like having the next document's been out for public consultation.
Yeah, okay.
It's been, and we've got recommendations in front of us. This one has been through Mana to Mana with our partners. That's been reviewed. There's been some changes made, and now we're sort of at the end of this process. We're about to adopt the reviewed MOU. So we've just been through a process is what the point I'm trying to make. Kevin.
Just point of clarification at the start. So iwi have gone through the terms of reference and are happy with that. So that's correct. Good. So the word relationship instead of partnership, by putting the word partnership, that's only one of the 5 principles that we should be putting in there. And all my experience in contracts, if you start listing things, if you don't list everything, all of a sudden you create room for people to wriggle out of later on. But the word relationship is completely compatible with the terms of reference that have just been updated and approved by our Mana to Mana iwi team. So they're happy with that. So the word relationship, the partnership is clearly covered under the Treaty of Waitangi. So that's where we should be.
That's correct.
And the only actual way we're going to improve our relationship is ensure that we actually do increase our adherence to those principles, of which partnership is one. So the word relationship, I think, covers both documents correctly. Now that you've confirmed that they have confirmed the document.
If you have a look at sections 1.2 and 1.3, and you just say that this has been signed off by the mana whenua of our region, then they actually use the word relationship, not partnership. If you in actual fact says this document seeks to further progress the relationship of the parties, not the partnership of them. And then in 1.3 it is, given the mutual desire of both parties to work collaboratively, blah, 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 Mana to Mana governance level forum has been pursued as a key element of the relationship. Now, you've just talked about you can't do this because Mana to Mana have signed it off. Well, that's what they've signed off. They've signed off a relationship, and they deliberately haven't used the word partnership in this document.
Thank you.
Don't know about
I'm going to refer to Amanda, and I sense that you've got a game breaker for us.
No, I don't think it's a game breaker, but it's just, I guess, I think those 2 parts of the resolution, one part of the resolution is to adopt or note the terms of reference. The above one, talking about the partnership and the Treaty of Waitangi, is, I think, a broader council commitment that Edward spoke about at Mana to Mana, which, he'd sort of talked about being in your camp, Andrew, around the council's commitment. So that's through a number of different things. It's having iwi representatives on strategy and planning committee. It's the relationship with Mana to Mana. It's a number of different things that form that overall partnership. And I think the risk of, well, I think, yeah, although it's a bit, I guess it's a bit backwards and forwards. So the risk of not calling it a partnership, even though you're wanting to reflect the Treaty of Waitangi principles, is right from the outset, you're not reflecting it as a partnership, you're calling it a relationship.
Mr. Chairman,
So it's just to add that context.
Can I ask this question?
Hang on, just let Amanda. Was there anything else you wanted to say, Amanda? But you're essentially emphasising it's more than just it's a broader partnership, rather than which encompasses all what we do in terms of interacting with mana whenua.
And that commitment to all those different activities that make up the partnership, of which the terms of reference of mana to mana, or the mana to mana meetings and the mana to mana activities are one part of that overall partnership. But I think it's built up over a number. It's having iwi at the table for decision making, at the table for inputting into plans and policies, all that stuff that the LGA requires us to do.
Thanks, Amanda.
I was just going to ask a question.
Michael.
Is there a possibility of getting us past this and not getting into a position where we are forced to divide in the elements of consensus, that we simply adjourn this until we actually have a very good idea from Mr. Ellison what he actually means by partnership, and that we have that debate? He didn't. Well, then in that case, if he didn't say it, then I suspect this is a bit of staff activism here.
No, definitely not. Michael, no, please.
Right. No, I'm allowed to say that.
No.
I'm allowed to say that.
Michael, can I just explain? Well, let's just go back to the last mana to mana, where there were a number of issues discussed, but we'd been through the Manuhira Kia decision-making process with regards to asking for some incomplete science to be completed, and that process was triggered. Now, there was some concern around mana whenua's involvement in that decision-making, and I made it clear at the time at Mana to Mana that the process didn't reflect either a good practice or didn't want to repeat the process in the future. We're looking at trying to build a stronger, more genuine partnership with mana whenua, and I was keen to ensure that happened going forward. So, and just going back to Amanda's point, where it's more than just the MOU. There are other activities, and we've heard that the CEO talk about it in terms of the staff collaboration that goes on, particularly in the policy space. There's a huge amount of interaction and work with Akaha and our policy staff, for example. But I would suggest there's a real ambition for this council to further develop that partnership in all sorts of ways in terms of delivering certain services to the community. The CEO's talked about potential scholarship's not the right word, but interns or graduate program, sorry. That type of partnership building in the future. So I think we're heading down a track of trying to wordsmith this to the extent that it actually takes out a fundamental principle of a relationship that we want to further develop in a genuine sense, and we want it to be a two-way relationship. We want it to be a consensus type decision-making process, but we also just want to, we not only want to do the right thing, but we want to do the right thing for our community. And, for me, I feel disappointed that there's a willingness at Mana to Mana to essentially embrace a flourishing partnership. But, we get to council and then we get picky about, one word and one recommendation out of 6. And I struggle, what sort of message does this send when we're actually trying to strengthen the relationship? And I hear Hilary and Michael in particular, focusing on relationship versus partnership. But I really think that's relatively petty on the overall concept of what we're trying to develop here. Okay. Amanda.
Started the debate, have we?
I was just going to, just to add to the conversation. Sorry, just to add to the conversation. So the long-term plan measures that talked about, we talked about partnerships. So build mana whenua participation and decision-making through a treaty-based partnership approach and our engagement. And the performance measure was work done in partnership with iwi. So I think that partnership language has been included in some of
Can
our
I ask the
documents already.
question of long-term plan? Still waiting for an answer. What the hell does partnership mean? There's been no definition of what partnership
Michael,
actually means.
Michael, we don't need to raise our voice.
Well,
okay?
it's
No,
just so
sorry, we
frustrating.
don't need to.
It's so frustrating.
Please. Now, is this a genuine question relating to the wording of a recommendation, Hillary?
I would like to move a motion, which I understand that Councillor Hobbs may wish to amend. And the reason I want to move it with the word relationship instead of the word partnership is that for me, relationship is a much bigger word. It's more inclusive. It talks about
Okay, so
all
if you're
sorts of
going
things.
to move, do you want to move the 6 recommendations with an amendment? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, with the word relationship
Okay,
instead
so we'll
of.
just get that on the table and we. Okay, so we'll get that on the table. Okay, so you want to speak to this?
And I would like a seconder.
Seconded.
Okay, you're speaking to it, Hillary?
Right. I don't think I could say it better than what Councillor Malcolm said. So I think we should reflect back on what Councillor Malcolm said about this issue. And it's important, in addition, it's important to me that we build on the relationship that we have with Kai Tahu, Ngāi Tahu, through this mana to mana thing. And I think that concentrating on using a word for partnership, which does have different nuances for different people, does not contribute to our wanting to be enhanced and deep relationship. I think the relationship is all important and it encompasses a lot more than just a partnership. Because to me, a partnership is a very specific thing from a legal point of view.
Okay, can I speak to it? I'm telling you, I'm going to speak to it. So speaking to the recommendation, I support them all except 2. For me, partnership is a really important word to have in the second recommendation for all the reasons that's already been outlined. And as Gretchen's already alluded to, reading between the lines under 5.1, it alludes to the key principles within the Treaty of Waitangi, which partnership is a key principle along with a number of others. So to me, like I've already said, I think it's petty to remove that word and replace it with relationship when it is an important and key word in terms of the way we look at mana to mana and our ongoing future partnership with mana whenua. Brian.
Yeah, I just like to say that I agree with what the chair's just said. I agree with the word petty. I've actually been sitting here listening for the last 5 or 10 minutes. To be honest, I've found it, grandstanding. It sounds like, New Zealand first at election time when nothing else needs to be come up with. When you look at the following report, which we're going to discuss shortly, it talks about a policy making a public commitment to partnership and engagement. This, to me, what this whole discussion's been about is some type of erosion of the benchmark of partnership. A partnership is important. We can look at it from a negative perspective, or we can look at it from the opportunity from it. Let's get on with it. I certainly won't be supporting the point number 2.
Gretchen, then Kate. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Chair, for the words that you've shared with us today. That's really good leadership, and I support the things that you have said. If we look at the purpose of the paper today, it's to provide an opportunity for Council to reaffirm its shared commitment to its partnership with local iwi and the Treaty of Waitangi. The recommendations actually reflect that really well. Sure, we can go round and round in circles and debate those points. That's within our rights. However, it does actually really quite annoy me that we have already set our council's strategic direction, and that's referred to in the paper as well. ORC strategic direction has the partnership with Kaitahu embedded throughout the work that ORC does, and it was a significant part of that work that we did, and we deliberately used the word partnership as a council, as a consensus, and then to go against that as a council when we'd made that decision in a consensus manner is annoying. Very more than annoying, actually. We want to go down this avenue of partnership in a meaningful way. We don't throw it back to iwi and say, oh, have we got all the words right in the mana to mana document. This is actually a paper far wider than the mana to mana terms of reference. This is about partnership and what we want to do. And yeah, I feel that removing that word does erode where we were heading. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate.
In many ways, I'm ambivalent to the term relationship or partnership. It's what we do on the ground and how we treat each other. I am more concerned actually with Te Tiriti or Waitangi, because I think they do have different meanings, and I hope that wasn't considered a petty comment, because I think, and I don't think anyone around the table necessarily is being petty when they're making these comments. The problem is that in Otago and Southland, the further you are away from Wellington, I think these issues are less well understood. And that's because there's a lot of our community don't get to understand this stuff. It's not on the cold face, and that isn't any fault of anyone. It's something that I think as leaders we need to be having those discussions out in our communities. And yes, certainly it was one that we were talking about yesterday on the River Care group down in South Otago. I think there's wonderful opportunities for us to be acting as leaders in here and ensuring that we grow, whether it be a relationship or a partnership, but we actually go out there and engage and ensure that they happen. The understanding of the difference of the treaty is something that really, really does concern me, because what I learned in my education was very different from what the Te Tiriti o Waitangi said. And that is an area that I think we need to be really working on and messaging with. So.
Thank you. Harry.
For me, it's quite straightforward. This paper is about reaffirming the terms of reference, and we have the terms of reference attached to the paper. We are being asked to reaffirm the ORC's partnership, but the terms of the partnership are not attached to the paper. So where the partnership is formal to me, relationship is less so. Relationship is referenced in the terms of reference. I haven't seen the terms of reference of the partnership attached to this paper, so I think the motion, in my perspective, is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michael.
I've said this before, but I'm just going to say it very quickly again. The ORC doesn't have a treaty partnership. The Treaty of Waitangi is between the Crown and Maori people. That's the law. There isn't a separate law that says that the Otago Regional Council is a treaty partner. It ain't. The Crown is. It's just Public Law 101, really. So moving on to the next issue, this isn't a petty issue. When you enter into a partnership with an external agency, it's not petty at all. It's extremely important, because you are advantaging one sector of the community over all others. So for that reason, you better define what a partnership is if you're going to be entering into one. And as Gary's just pointed out, we haven't. There's nothing wrong with these terms of reference. They're excellent. But I note that throughout all of them, they're talking about a relationship and strengthening that relationship and trying to collaborate together on issues. But partnership is something entirely different than relationship. As I've explained already, there's a difference between a marriage and a one-night stand. Finally, on this issue, I also want to look at.
So we're doing the one night stand, are we?
No.
Please, Brian.
If you want to enter, yeah.
Michael?
Well,
That's what she said.
Listen.
Michael, no, hang on. No, I don't want
He's
the
asked a
interaction.
question.
No, he hasn't.
All right.
No. I want you to wrap up, please, Michael.
No, I'm taking my 5 minutes, thanks.
Yeah, I know, that's what you're
thank you.
about 4.5.
No, I'm not.
Come on.
The other issue here, though, is that we haven't had the debate, actually. And so what this allows us now to do is have that debate. Our community hasn't had it. But I've already heard something here that we're going to be entering scholarships. What? Where did that come from? So that's already an idea of there are ideas being cast around this table or in this building as to what a partnership will look like. And I'm thinking, when did we have that debate? When did we talk about what a partnership might mean in real terms? We haven't. So I can't support the motion that we're in a partnership. I support the amendment, which is that we are in a relationship that is evolving. And I like the fact that the people who are leading this have given us a document that allows that relationship to evolve.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, what I'm going to suggest is that we take 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I will put those in a moment, and then we'll deal with 2, and we'll just go straight to a division. Okay.
I'd like you to take them separately, please.
You want them all taken separately?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. That's fine. But I'll deal with 1, then 3, 4, 5, 6, and then deal with 2.
I'd like to talk to 6.
Okay. I'll put 1 that we note the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. 3 notes the updated mana to mana terms of reference. I'll put that number 3. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. 4, request the chair to request mana to consider expanding the membership of all 12 councillors. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. 5 notes that mana to mana operates on the basis of consensus. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now, we've already had speakers. However, I'm in a lenient mood.
No, it's just on number 6.
6.
So, okay, speakers to number 6, Michael.
You know my views on this. I think it was at a workshop, so we discussed this about what is bicultural competency. For start with, it was cultural competency, and then it got changed to bicultural competency. Can I just say I find the term offensive? It suggests that, you know, if you don't go to these particular sessions that are being planned, you're incompetent. And there's a breadth of experience that all councillors have around the table. I don't like the words. I can't vote for this. I can't even commit to it because it's imprecise as to what it actually means, or in actual fact, why you would seek to separate us into the concept of competent or incompetent. It's just one of those woke words that's permeated the English language in the last 5 years. It means nothing. And so for those reasons, I won't be voting for it.
Okay, my only comment would be in the body of the report, paragraphs 13, 14 and 15 clearly outlines what the reference is in terms of biocultural competency learning. Are there any other
So
speakers?
you're incompetent if you don't go to those?
No, I didn't say that. Any other speakers on number 6? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Carried.
Who's moved and seconded that one?
That was moved by Hillary and seconded by Michael originally. Yep. So going back to number 2, we'll just go straight to a division.
Yes, it is.
Yep. No. You made that point. Yep. That's,
With all due respect now.
No, we're not going to have. No.
It's a question.
Well, is it to do with the process?
Yes, it is. There are 2 different concepts there. The first one is the ORC's relationship with iwi. And then the second concept is what councillors' commitment to the Treaty of Waitangi.
Michael, look, we've had a fair crack at.
No, I'm just asking,
no, no.
are those two different concepts?
I understand the linguistic improperness, and I'm prepared to live with it, Michael.
All right.
Okay. Division, thanks, Di. Yes, yes, yep, thanks. Thanks, Marion.
I'll do that.
No.
Signaled it.
Foreshadowed an alternative motion.
Yeah, it's not, it's a negative.
Councillor Calvert?
Okay, everyone's listening. Councillor Calvert?
Yes. Councillor Hobbs?
No.
Councillor Hope?
Yes.
Councillor Laws?
Yes.
Councillor Callagher?
Yes.
Councillor Malcolm?
No.
Councillor Noon?
No.
Robertson?
No.
Councillor Scott?
No.
Councillor Wilson?
No. I'd rather abstain, actually. Should have abstained.
4-5.
Hate having those discussions. We should have got her acted better.
Motion lost 4-6. So, Marion. Okay.
Instead of relationship.
So much for consensus.
Okay. We'll just keep the snipey stuff, please. So let's just go back to a division as well for this one. So it's been moved by Hillary, seconded by Gretchen. Moved by Marion. Oh, come on, Hillary. Moved Marion, seconded Gretchen.
Division.
It is now, the motion now says, so yeah, can we talk to that?
No, because this is an amendment. No.
I mean, it's a shadow.
Yeah, it was a foreshadowed amendment.
It is a new motion.
Yeah,
motion.
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Calvert? No. Councillor Hobbs? Yes. Councillor Hope?
Councillor Hope?
Yes.
Councillor Laws?
No.
Councillor Callagher?
No.
Councillor Malcolm?
I would have liked the chance to talk, but yes.
Councillor Noon?
Yes.
Councillor Robertson? Yes. Councillor Scott?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson? Yes.
So 7-4, 3 against, motion carried. Yep.
No.
10 in total.
4 because there's only 10 of us.
Yeah, so 7, sorry.
Oh.
7 said yes, 3 said no. Sorry. It's a loose.
Good ears, though.
Losing my mum.
It's good on risk to listening to the numbers.
Excellent. Let's move on. So that motion's carried. Like moving on to the 7.3. He mahi rao Eureka.
Very happy to move.
Welcome, Richard. This is the significant engagement in Maori participation policy adoption, which has been through a consultation process, acknowledgement to Chair Deaker and Councillors Scott and Wilson. The Strategy and Planning Committee on the 7th of July obviously triggered this process for consultation. Public consultation involved receiving 2 submissions, one from Akaha and one from Matt Korori, I believe. And hearing was held on the 16th of September, and the recommendations from the hearings panel are below. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Richard? Thank you for being with us.
No, I think much of it might have been covered in that previous paper, so it's here. And yeah, look, thanks to the 3 councils involved in the hearing. It was difficult around COVID time to get that underway, but we got there. So that's obviously reflected in that paper, which Councillor Deaker has signed off. So happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Any queries, Marion? Marion.
Sorry, lovelies. Sorry. From the submission from Mata Waka. We live in a really strange position down here in the south because we have, it's not like in Northland where every hapu is virtually an iwi, you know, but we have one substantially strong iwi with a really solid governance and administration through all the different runaka. And here is somebody substantially saying something that the Pākehā part of me sort of says, that's really fair. I am not of Kaitahu and I want a voice too. Holy shit. So I was just very interested as to, were Kaitahu anywhere around the hearings on this? No. Yeah.
So they didn't speak to their submission or Okaha who'd submitted. So we haven't. There was you would have noted the resolution is to refer the matter to Mana Tamana for a discussion, but also there is a role through the engagement. Through our engagement and our commitment to engage with Māori broadly and the community for staff, and there is a new role, the Principal Advisor for iwi Partnerships and Stakeholders that will be filled by David Cooper, who you're familiar with, starting early New Year, and one of his roles will be to engage with Mr. Kiori and just have a discussion around his submission, how he feels there could be better engagement with that group to ensure that council can give them a chance to be involved in that process. So there's 2 different discussions. There's a governance discussion to have through Mana Tamana, and we've put that on the agenda for the next meeting. And then there's a staff discussion to have following up from Mr. Kiori's submission, which is what the 3 councillors on the panel asked us to do as part of their resolutions.
Okay.
Michael.
So can I understand and clarify this? This is a draft policy that's going to Mana Tamana. It's not. This is the policy we adopt today, if we adopt it. So it's been to Mana Tamana and it's been approved.
Into a hearing.
So it doesn't get approved by Mana Tamana. It went to Mana Tamana early in the development process, and then they were also made aware of it when it was out for consultation. And through Okaha, they submitted on it, but they don't have a role to approve it. That comes to council for approval.
Ironic, isn't it? But also the other thing that's ironic in here is that you use the word relationship, not partnership, in terms of, is there a reason why you use that word? So I've noticed when the council relationship arrangements with Mana Whenua, on the left-hand side, it's got relationship element, the other aspects, it's got key aspects. As a consequence of that resolution passed today, is that still the appropriate word to use?
Look, I'm comfortable with the terms used in the document we've submitted.
Second one is, could you please explain to me on page, I think it's the second page that I looked at about what we do. It says ORC speak with one voice. There it is. It's page, sorry, it's page 180 of my agenda, but it's page 9 of the paper.
So that was a question, I think you had councillors when we brought the draft up. So what that means is that what the feedback we've had from the community at times is that there can be a disconnect between when they're speaking to different staff about different components of our business. So what this is committing to do is ensuring that our staff using our strategic directions as guidance are speaking consistently when we're speaking to the community. It in no way takes away the ability of this table to express your views when you're making decisions on things, but it does guide staff in the way that they're interacting with the community and the conversations that we're having.
So this isn't a governance document, it's a staff document?
So governance are signing it off, but it will guide the actions of staff around our communications and engagement activity.
Any further speak, Gary?
Couple of questions just on, so in the options, we've got advantages and disadvantages for option one. And disadvantage of option one is that some projects will incur additional costs to ensure they undertake engagement consistency with the new policy. And then option three, an advantage is that there'll be no additional costs. How much are the additional costs?
We haven't quantified those, and that's because we don't know what projects in the future, what all the projects in the future are, and what engagement activities they'll require. They won't be significant, but by committing to consistent engagement of this nature, using that IAP2 guidance, we will be out holding more meetings and having more conversations, and that has a cost of staff time. It's hard to quantify, but I think it's important to acknowledge that we are making a commitment over and above what we've done in the past to get out and have conversations with our communities and engage on matters of importance, and that comes with a time and materials cost. But I wouldn't say it is significant, but it's worth acknowledging, but we can't quantify it because it's determined by the future work program.
Right, so it's an unbudgeted cost.
It will have to be budgeted in future projects when they are designing. When you're designing your project budget and you're considering engagement, you will have to consider this document, and you'll have to get guidance from the staff who are charged with giving effect to it, and then you can cost that as part of your project.
Right. And just on the actual document or policy itself, it is a significance and engagement and Maori participation policy for everybody, for all of the community.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hilary, then Brian.
Are we in partnership with Ma'ata Waka?
We don't have a formal governance arrangement with Matawaka.
Is that we're not in a partnership with them?
We don't have any formal governance arrangement.
We're generally, under the Treaty of Waitangi, in partnership with Maori.
No, Maori.
Mana whenua.
No, because it says it alternates here with Maori, and I'm saying this is.
I think the answer though that Richard's given.
Yeah,
we're
not. So he's saying we're not.
Correct.
I'm saying we don't have a formal agreement. We have responsibilities under the Local Government Act to give opportunities for all Māori to participate, and we do that, and that's what this
But you
sets
don't
out.
consider we're in partnership with them, was a question.
No, I didn't say that. I said we didn't have a formal
I know
arrangement.
you didn't,
I
and
can't
I'm
answer that question. It's not for me to answer. I can only talk about what arrangements we have in place.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who can? Is any of our staff able to answer whether we're in partnership with them?
I think Richard's given the answer to the council's position, so I'm not sure whether.
No, he's given the answer to what formal.
Could I direct you to Kupu
Hang on, please, Marion. Please, Sarah.
I think Richard quite helpfully said that David is starting in his new role in January, and from there we will start to develop the relationship with Mart Waka.
Right, so do you think the most accurate thing would be that at the moment we don't in a formal sense, but we maybe expect to develop one? Is that a fair?
We need to understand what their expectations might be.
Thank you. Yeah, I see under recommendation 5, notes that staff will include a discussion on engagement with Mara Waka at a future Mana Tamana meeting. So
no, but I just didn't understand whether we were starting from a position of partnership or not, but not
yet. Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to point out that in recommendations 5, where it includes a discussion and engagement with Mata Waka at a future Mana Tamana meeting, and this recommendation 6 notes that staff will engage with the submitters to discuss opportunities to improve engagement with Mata Waka. So I think it's generally acknowledged that, there's potential for some work there. The other recommendations that stand out to me, obviously, is the adoption of the report, and also recommendation number 7, where it says that the performance of this policy will be evaluated annually. So if it's not working, then we need to revisit it.
I wasn't criticising it.
No, we know that we're not going to cross chatter. That's all good. You're finished, Brian? Yes, thank you. Marion, then Michael, and then Kevin.
I found under the heading Kupu Whakataki a really clear description of the roles of mana whenua, and then the work of greater involvement of Māori and local government activity, including Māori whose whakapapa to land in place is elsewhere in New Zealand. I thought that was probably one of the best pieces of clear explanation of the difference.
Well, what page is it, Mary?
On mine, it's 173 of 233.
Michael, then Kevin.
That's what I was going to deal with. I've raised it before, but again, I think it needs to be emphasised. I've got no difficulty with us having a relationship with Ngāi Tahu. And it's wonderful that we've passed a protocol as to how that relationship should develop and envelop, whether it's a partnership or a relationship. But I'm looking at the significance policy, and the bit that's missing is non-Ngāi Tahu. The Māori who live here, who are covered by the Local Government Act of 2002, but who are not the local iwi. And I'm struggling to see anything in this document that engages with them. No, where is it? I've looked at it. I'm struggling to see how that engagement is defined, is going to work, and our commitment to it.
We've acknowledged that there's a shortcomings. That's why recommendations.
I know you asked a question. I just want everyone, all other councillors, to be quiet. It's a small thing.
Yeah. It's page 2 of the policy.
Yeah.
Under the introduction, second paragraph.
Yes, I've read that, but I don't see that developed anywhere in the document. It's an introductory paragraph. It's almost like a throwaway line. In fact, it is a throwaway line. But there's nothing in the document which starts to enumerate what is going to be the significance policy for Māori that actually picks them up. You don't talk about them again.
So the role.
Microphone, thanks, Richard.
Sorry, Andrew. I would have to go through it in detail, but again, this was a line of questioning, as you pointed out, that we had through the draft policy when we came here for approval to consult. So it's acknowledged that there are Māori within Otago who are not mana whenua, and their rights for engagement or participation in local government processes set out in the Local Government Act, and we need to ensure that through the opportunities we provide to engage with them and with the broader Otago community. So it may not be in there specifically, but it certainly is pointed to as being something that we acknowledge and will give effect to.
But out of how many pages is this document? 14, 16? In essence, there is one line. And that's all I'm saying to you, Richard.
So it's in, and it is only broad, again, acknowledge that, but paragraph 1 on page 4, which is the page with the photo of the marae on it, again, acknowledges that there is broader legislative requirements for Māori engagement.
Exactly, there is.
Yep.
So in other words, it says you've got a responsibility. It's in the law. Off you go and do it. What I'm saying to you is this doesn't do it, does it? This doesn't actually specify or enumerate how that engagement should occur, and yet it does for Ngāi Tahu.
Which is the purpose of it, is the going. No, you've asked it, so I'll answer it. So the purpose of it is we have acknowledged and committed to meeting our legislative requirements to for all Māori under the Local Government Act and for communities under the Local Government Act through significant engagement. On top of that, we are going above and beyond through our partnership and the efforts we are making with mana whenua to ensure we can deliver on our requirements. For example, delivering Matauranga Māori requires and can only be given effect to through mana whenua, so we need to if we're going to deliver our work program. So I think we do acknowledge the broader Māori requirements of the Local Government Act, but this intentionally goes over and above for mana whenua for us to be able to deliver effectively on what we need to with our partners.
Thank you. Kevin, Gretchen, Kate.
Look, probably just as a comment, this is an exceptionally difficult set of relationships that we've got to deal with. And I think so many people right throughout the country at the moment are grappling with, am I dealing with mana whenua? Am I dealing with some Maori group that's just come to my town? We've got the exact same thing with groups I'm working with in the Waitaki at the moment, that we've grabbed the equivalent of Matthew Kaori's group in the Waitaki, and they're meeting with mana whenua to give me some answers in our group how we can best deal with both parties. So I refer to what Councillor Scott has said. If we read, I think it's 5, 6 and 7, that look, there's a lot of work has to be done. But this is a good start. It is building a great relationship will be the answer to how good that partnership is going to be. I just understand that was
just before we go.
It is a difficult look. It is difficult, and we won't always get it right, but we need to keep working through it.
Kevin, before we go to Gretchen and Kate, are you happy to move 1 to 7?
I thought the hearings panel might.
Oh, sorry.
The hearings panel.
Okay, right. Sorry. Gretchen, in your
I
hands.
was going to suggest that Kate could go before.
I had said earlier that I'd move it, but it was the hearings panel. I thought both the hearings panel should be moving. I'm sure that Councillor Deaker would prefer to be doing that, but he's not here.
So you're happy to move 1 to 7, Kate?
Yes, and I'll talk to it when I get the chance.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Brian. Gretchen and then Kate.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the panel. This is quite a important and broad-ranging document that looks at our significant engagement policy, and that's on a whole range of issues regarding proposals, assets, decisions and activities, what significance entails, and then also how we engage with a wide range of community. So as well as the Māori participation policy, it's a very broad document. It's been through a process. It's had submissions to it. It's been considered by a hearings panel, and come back to us. So, I think it's been through due process, and I'm just looking forward to adopting it today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. It was a really interesting process having to sit on this, short as it was, but it did take us to a space which was different. And just to reassure anyone who is wondering about that Maori liaison as broader than mana whenua, it is a matter that we have raised a number of times since this hearing. At the strategy and planning it was raised, and even as recently as yesterday, Edward referenced it as something that, to ensure that it happens, out in the Land and Water Regional Plan, it is not the job of mana whenua to do it. It is our job, and he's really clear about that. He will assist. And so one of the debates was, should we just be putting in the mana whenua marae, or should we be putting in the other marae that are in Otago? And so those are discussions that are going to happen at mana to mana. So it is a much bigger picture, and it certainly means that we should be reaching out wherever we can and showing leadership, and ensuring that we're looking at all groups, not just mana whenua, to take the load of that broader Maori interests.
Thank you, Hilary, then Gary.
Just two things. The first is that I support where we're going, and I thank the people who are involved with getting us there. It's a difficult thing to get to the bottom of a variety of these relationships, and this seems certainly on the right track, and thank you for those councillors and for Richard and his team, and to Edward and co, whoever's been involved with it. The second thing I'd like to say, just because I like words and things, is that I'd like to commend Richard, since his name is mentioned twice. I won't say Richard and somebody, but author and endorsed by, for this paper in front of us. I notice it involves us having three options, which I always love in a paper. One of which you can do it, the other of which you can not do it, and the third one of which you can do it with some changes. And even the discipline of presenting to us those three options when we're considering something is something I really appreciate. So Richard, thank you for putting those there with advantages and disadvantages and setting them out to allow us to look at the proposal and have presented to us some advantages and disadvantages of the choices we're making. I commend you on your paper and your options that you've presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, I have some niggles. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. It's been through a very robust process. It did not get a lot of submitters, and they tended to be from one sector of the policy, I suppose. One of my niggles is around on the commitments and challenges. And I think our previous meeting, we had jumped on my petty request then about the poor old customer being right at the very bottom of the list, and we had moved that we would move them up the list, and that hasn't been done in the list in the document here. While central government remains very happily parked right at the top. The other one with me, that this is a significance and engagement policy. It further embeds, or I guess very much expands, I think, on our marriage or relationship to Maori, and it's very heavily focused on that. To me personally, it feels like a further divorce to the rest of the community. And it does very well, I think, in what we should be doing with iwi. I've got no problem with that. The rest of the community are lacking. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Any further speakers? Have you not spoken?
I've asked a question.
Oh, sorry. Beg pardon, Michael.
Very quickly, I won't be voting for this very simply because the name of this is, well, its English subtitle is the Otago Regional Council Significant Engagement and Maori Participation Policy. And the acknowledgement from some of those sitting around the table is that, yeah, well, we're going to work on doing the non-iwi part of this, or the non-mana whanua part of this in the future, which is not in actual fact discharging, I believe, the proper requirements of the ORC. I've harped on about it. I will continue to do so. There is a divergence in the Maori community between local iwi and between Maori who are not local iwi. And it's happening all throughout New Zealand. Some regional councils foster that by saying, listen, we'll establish seats. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council is a good example, in which all Maori who are resident in our region may vote and therefore have their representatives sitting at the council table. Others have chosen, like the Otago Regional Council, to have to say, well, there's only one iwi we're going to be dealing with out of all of the Maori in New Zealand, and it's the local people, and we'll give them that status. And that's what this document does. I do not believe it discharges our responsibilities under the Local Government Act of 2002 to involve Maori. If that act meant to include mana whenua, it would have said it. So I cannot vote for this policy because I do not believe that we have discharged our responsibility to those Maori who are not mana whenua or local iwi in the Otago region.
Any further speakers? Kate, write a reply.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this is our all ratepayers and all residents of Otago council significance and engagement policy. On top of that, it is our Māori participation policy with mana whenua. That doesn't take away from the need, as we have on a number of topics, to grow a policy on other things. But in the meantime, this is the best we've got. It's gone through a hearing process of which raised that other niggle as something we haven't dealt with. Just because we haven't done that doesn't mean we shouldn't be supporting it. We haven't finished a lot of our other plans, but we carry on with other work. So I just want to make sure that people realise this is everyone. This is about consulting with everyone, and it also shows that special relationship we've got with mana whenua. Please support it, because I think that's about us moving on from where we may have been in the previous debate, but also and totally anticipate that we will review it and ensure that we can get a better way of dealing with other interest groups, whether they are Maori, but there are possibilities for other interest groups to be articulated differently and ensured that we consult with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put all these recommendations together from 1 to 7. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Carried. Thank you very much, Richard. Moving on to item 7. Cup of tea?
After that,
It's only half past two.
Hang on, let's deal with 7.4 and then we've, as
Okay.
Brian said, a cup of tea.
Cool.
So this is the Otago South River Care Group councillor appointment. This report is to provide further information on the request to appoint a councillor representative on the Otago South River Care Project Governance Group. You'll remember that we had a report in front of us at the last council meeting, and I just need to check with Di. Do we need to uplift? Did we not let it lie on the table? So do I need to move that we uplift that recommendation?
The paper.
The paper? Oh, the paper was, it's all good? Okay, righto. These recommendations superseded anyway. Okay. Welcome, Amanda. The 3 recommendations there, obviously we need to decide on a councillor and also an alternate as well. So welcome, Amanda. Was there anything you wanted to add? Obviously you had a conversation with Lloyd McCaw, who's one of the key shaker and movers in terms of the governance group with the Otago South River Care. Anything else you wanted to share with us? You've outlined your conversation you had with him, and he reconfirmed that it's very much an overarching body that hasn't really any operational decision making with regards to what the catchment group work is in terms of happening on the ground, whether it's employment of staff or project management or whatever. It's a high level umbrella group that's overseeing the overall project.
Yeah, so and overseeing that specific project, the projects related to that funding that's come in. So it's not the broad ambit of all the catchment group activities.
Any questions and queries before we go to the recommendations? Michael?
So is the idea of this project, it's funded by MPI, is it's got a finite life, or is it meant to be ongoing? Because the vision would suggest that it is ongoing and that the money is basically to set it up. Have I got that wrong?
So
that's my understanding, is that the funding's for the sort of first 3 to 5 years of setting that up and achieving a whole lot of things. But the idea is there's a whole lot of work going on already, so it complements and supplements that and then continues.
So the question that I was going to ask is, so it is meant to be ongoing, which would be great. That's fantastic. But does that mean that, and I just want to cast your eyes forward in terms of the long-term plan, that we may get entreaties from the Otago South River Care Group to fund aspects of the work? I mean, if this is sort of an establishment grant, as I understand it, then it would logically flow that they would want to carry on doing their work and that it would be augmented by the ORC.
I couldn't comment on that. I've just been looking at it through a governance lens on having someone on the governance group. So in terms of long-term potential funding requests, I haven't talked about that.
Kate and I attended sort of a strategy planning session for the Otago South River Care stakeholder group yesterday. So they've secured 1.8 from MPI. The contribution from farmers and beneficiaries of the work is 1.6. So it's a $3.4 million project over a 3-year period. They've got a whole lot of different goals and targets, and they're going to do market research and all sorts of other, a whole lot of other criteria that they've got to deliver on as part of the condition of that money from MPI. I'm not sure what will happen after 3 years' time. I don't know. And that's something we talked briefly about when we had our last finance briefing on year 2 of the LTP is something we need to be mindful of. Kate, did you want to add to that?
I would just add that I think that they will be looking through potential funding from OCC and possibly EcoFund, but not directly, is my gut feeling, the way they see that. So the projects would have to fit in to an EcoFund sort of project, and it may be for stuff that is part of the contract or not, because this contract does some things. It doesn't necessarily do everything that the catchment wants to do.
Thank you. Mary and then Brian.
They're not going to go for money out of our, what do you call those groups?
OCC.
OCC.
No, made from OCC because it's part of the OCC.
Well, that's what you can get.
Yeah.
OCC and ECO, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ron.
I mean, just to make the point that a percentage of the ORC funding for the OCC is actually passed on to other groups in Otago through an application process, and that's definitely the intent. And I know, for example, that I think the first recipient is NOSLAM, and so previously that was funded through the ORC. Now it's via the OCC, and I think that's the intent over time.
Gary.
I'd like to move the 3 recommendations, and I'd like to nominate the 2 Clutha councillors. Molyneux, sorry. Molyneux councillors. Given that it's in their patch, and I think it's an opportunity for them to be having ongoing and long-term engagement. I think it's madness really for someone from Central Otago or Dunedin or heaven forbid Waitaki to be going into that area even though Waitaki would undertake a wonderful job there. And between them, they can slug it out who is.
Carmen for 2, please.
So
I'll second that.
Okay, so recommendation 2 is agrees to nominate Councillor Hope as ORC councillor to join the Otago South River Care Governance Group, and number 3 agrees to nominate Councillor Wilson as an alternative.
It's good, and we can't hear Carmen, so if she wasn't wanting to do that, it's fine.
She's been away, but she's just back, so she
No,
should be
I'm
able to hear
here.
us.
We don't want an acceptance speech.
I am here, sorry, Chair Noon.
Oh, excellent. Moved by Gary, seconded by Kevin.
Yep.
So Carmen, you heard the conversation?
Yeah, yes, I did, and I really appreciate that. I'd be quite honoured to, and I'm delighted that Councillor Wilson, also from Molyneux Ward, would be able to step in when I'm unavailable, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Cool. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put those 3 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, let's stand adjourn and reconvene at 3 o'clock. Does that work, Guy?
Sorry about doing this. It's just so tempting.
Thank you all.
It makes me calmer.
Just 2 metres. If you're carrying, you've made your cup of coffee.
You can still eat them.
I wouldn't eat them. I noticed there's little plantlets in the botanic gardens too that you might
Okay.
We're live.
Welcome back, everybody. We're now on item 7.5. This is the Wari Runanga ORC Dunedin Head Office update. Essentially, this report is to provide an update regarding the head office accommodation process. And just as a background, welcome, Nick. As a background, council will receive regular updates as the project progresses and key governance decisions are needed. Council may wish to consider nominating a councillor to be a member of the ORC internal steering group. Councillors will also be invited to attend a scoping session for the council chamber as users. Nick, is there anything you would like to add? Give us any from a financial perspective, anything you want to comment on? Nothing to update us on?
No, I think you've summed it up. It's all there. So happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Brian.
How often would the steering group actually come back to the council and at least give us an update so we could provide some general feedback and have some connection? This is over and above our one potential representative. So how often would we just turn up and cut the cake?
No. Well, we would report to council.
Relatively, how often?
Yeah, well, it would be regularly, and it would either be through the finance committee or through full council.
Cool. Thank you.
Any further questions? Gary?
Yep. Are we comfortable that just having one councillor to sit in the steering group really satisfies having governance involvement? And I suppose where I'm getting to is that because this is such a political hot potato, it's our very much possibly largest spend that council might undertake as one item in the triennium, and very contentious that would we be better to have maybe 4 councillors, 2 being chair and deputy chair, and 2 others to give a greater councillor input into that process? That would be my question.
Yeah. Is that a political question or a staff question?
It's a question to how staff may view that as for the functionality of the committee, and then to councillors and you, Chair, as to the structure and whether you think that's a good idea or not.
I'll go to Sarah and...
Yep. Well, you just about be outnumbering the steering group if there was 4 of you. But I mean, I would say that the role of the steering group is in, everything from, initial design down to paint colours and so in my view, it is a largely operational function. And I think 4 councillors would be probably more than you would need. And I would suspect that you would quickly probably find that it wasn't as you maybe expected. As far as the spend is concerned, that is actually still up for discussion at the moment. The largest part of the spend will be borne by the port. And so actually, in real terms, what's budgeted for the fit out isn't too much different to a large planning process. Yeah.
I suppose from my perspective, I hear what you're saying, Gary, in terms of the, I'll come to you in a minute, Hilary. It is a major project, absolutely. And politically, I suppose, if you put the community hat on for a moment, politically, I would suggest we will be under scrutiny to ensure that there's a governance lens. And I appreciate that the internal steering group, its job description probably isn't where, you know, the community is looking for a governance overview, but I think we need to be involved, and if it's the internal steering group, I think that certainly gives governance a good insight into how things are progressing. But I think that community lens will be fairly focused on us. So I understand where you're coming from politically, and I feel that a degree of what do I say? Not pressure is not the right word, but I think it's important that we are there as that. I see it as a governance role in some form, and yeah, I hear what you're saying. Sorry,
can I just
didn't make a lot of
to that?
sense, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Do you mind if I respond, especially to the comments that Sarah had just made?
Okay.
Well, look, I think it's more about how do we achieve success with this, because we're moving in a direction that we agree to achieve this, and it has been on the table for so long, and there has been so much money lost in this, and it's had almost separate directions where we've had very lavish designs that have then end up becoming very political amongst the councillors, and it's been stymied, and then looking for sites and everything else. It worries me a wee bit around the port advancing the project, and then the end result being presented to council, because we will be expecting, I guess, a decision around do we buy this building in the end or not, based on the end result and how we fund it. All of that is yet to be worked through. But what we need to have is the councillors on board with the staff, and neither at odds with each other in what we advance forward design-wise, cost-wise, and everything else. So I just see a greater level of connectivity and better chance of success of this project if there is a greater level of governance within the steering group.
Can I ask a question?
Just before I go to you, Hilary.
Oh, sorry.
Because I would like Councillor Malcolm to sit back from the table and keep out of this and this discussion, because I'm thinking of nominating him as our representative in here, and I don't know whether him taking part in the discussion gets in the way of that at all.
He's allowed to ask questions.
No more than.
It's fine. I just so I'm foreshadowing that I would like to propose that Councillor Malcolm be a representative of ours on the steering committee, particularly because he is the port liaison person and a finance person. And I think the greatest risk, and I'm speaking with my audit and risk hat on here, is that we look like a pack of pillocks wasting money on doing the next thing. I don't think we're going to be criticised by the community for the colour of the drapes somebody might be choosing on a committee, but I do think we could be being criticised by things to do with financial things we choose to do. And I have a strong degree of faith in Councillor Malcolm being on that steering committee and being able to support the reports back that come to us at regular intervals as described by Sarah.
So you've moved that. You're moving that now. That Councillor Malcolm is that representative.
Yes, I would like to do that.
We have a seconder. A seconder by Marion. So, because there could be multiple membership here. So you're speaking to this motion, are you, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, Brian.
It's just a quick one. It's just a question of clarification.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do too.
Yeah. How many people are actually proposed to be on the steering group? We'll give a bit of a context.
Sure.
Okay.
So it is ELT, the executive advisor, who is the internal project manager for the project, the chairs of the technical and staff reference groups, as have been defined for you on the paper, and we've suggested one councillor.
So how many is that in total?
Yeah, roughly.
Oh, there's 10 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, so having 2 councillors is not untoward.
that's exactly the question I was going to ask. Is it possible to have 2?
Yes.
It is.
Well, Sarah's
Maybe
indicating there's roughly
Yes.
10.
Yes,
Yeah.
2 would be fine.
Okay. Well, then you need to think about your motion.
So can I make a suggestion? So there was a discussion between myself. I'm not sure whether Michael was there for that particular discussion with the CE. I can't remember, around Gretchen being involved oh, you may not have been, yeah, for several reasons. One was, it was in the minutes, yeah. So one of our Monday midday meetings, 12:30 meetings or whatever. So there's a couple of reasons. One was that she had had previous experience with head office looking for a resolution, for a head office historically. Plus, she'd been a staff member, understood the requirements of staff in terms of internal fit out, etc. And obviously she's a councillor as well. So I would be happy to suggest, if you would like to add Gretchen to your motion.
I have listened to you and I would like to add Gary to my motion, who's an out-of-town person, because I think this is for several reasons. As I say, I think it's a finance protection that we particularly want. But the other thing is a version of that sometimes one of the loudest people about some things around our table is Councillor Kelleher, and I suspect if he was in the tent rather than outside the tent, we may have a more smooth ride in the reporting process and the understanding of what's going on process. I think it's the finances are really important here. I think if we're looking at, and I take your point about Councillor Robertson, that she is somebody who is understanding long term from here, both from sort of a staff perspective and a councillor perspective. But the long-standingness is part of the issue here, because the people out in the community are wondering why we spent all this money over the last however many years on whatever it is, and internal staff people are already seriously represented around the table. So, and I'm happy to make my 2 recommendations separately, because Councillor Hobbs may want to support one and not the other, for all I know, if she was seconding my. So it's mine.
Before I go to Michael, because Dunedin's such a little town and everyone knows everyone else's business, is not an issue with your situation with regards to the building. So no. The fact that you're involved.
He doesn't own the building.
No.
Hang on,
just
hold. Let him say.
Just the fact that you're promoting and you're in the discussion. I'm just raising that from a conflict point of view. That's all. Just.
You don't have do you have a conflict? No, of course you don't.
Just. Mike.
I don't consider me helping choose somebody as at all a conflict. And if somebody wants to have a go with a conflict, I don't see why. We're going ahead with the building. I'm not wanting to take part in any of that, and that's fine.
Needed to ask the question,
yeah.
So it's on the record. So there's, so you've made that comment, that's fine. So
yeah, I'm happy to have that comment on the record, although I had thought of my situation and conflicts as you invited us to at the beginning of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Hilary. So you've moved 2 councillors, correct? Councillors Malcolm and Councillors Kelleher. That's where it's at the moment. The seconder for the first motion was Marion. And if it was going to be included all in the same motion, the 2 councillors in the one motion, are you happy to second that Marion?
My preference is actually for Gretchen, so I'm not happy to second it.
Okay, so you're going to second the first one, so we'll
Yeah.
just park the, okay. So we just got, at the moment, we're just speaking to the, to Councillor Malcolm being part of this
Oh, are we?
group.
Are we? Was there a general? Are we still?
I'm still asking
allowed to ask questions.
You're still asking, cool, we'll go back to questions then. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Michael,
And then me.
and then
questions.
Marion, and then Brian. Sorry.
Thank you.
A couple of questions of Sarah. The technical advisory group, who's on that?
So that is internal staff who have particular requirements. For example, IT, because obviously that's very technical. They need to be working very closely on some of those technical issues and requirements. We also have field staff representative, again, because we'll be integrating field staff in terms of the building, and there are some really good opportunities that the building gives us for that. So we want to make sure that, you know, we're not just providing office space, we're actually providing a very functional space for all of the functions that we have. So that's why we've got a technical group that has specific technical functions.
I guess the reason I'm asking that question, and it seems to me the bit that's missing, because also from the internal steering group, is that there's a very, well, it's overwhelmingly staff and then plus governance. And I'm thinking, I bet you not many of these people know how to build a building or how to construct one. In other words, the external experts that you'd want to be able to advise or to give you the latest. I was thinking that perhaps they'd be on the technical advisory. Are you intending to get external consultants?
No, because as we say in the paper, it's a port project. So what you're looking at is how we're organising ourselves internally to feed in to the port project.
Oh, right. So the technical advisory group and the internal steering group go to the port.
So the representatives of the steering group that meet with the port and the port control group are Nick, myself, and our executive advisor.
So there's a sort of a three-tier operation going. There's the tag group, and then there's the I've seen, but I'm just trying to clarify it. And then there's this group, and then you go to the port. Where's and council signs it off, I guess, right at the end.
Well, there'll be parts that council might sign off, depending on the way that you go with how the project rolls. And so, for example, if you purchase the building, then that's potentially a different scenario to the one we currently have, which is leasing the building, right? So with leasing the building, the port is the owner, therefore the port is making the investment in sorting out the structural elements to make it fit for purpose for us. We then have a piece of that in the fit out, if you see what I mean.
Yes,
Desks,
I do.
Chairs.
It's a slightly confused structure, though, isn't it? Because
because it's an operational internal structure.
No, but
it's not a governance structure.
No. Sorry, let me finish. It's a confused structure because let me finish. It's a confused structure because what you would not normally have is the landlord fitting out a building, and in this particular case, it is the tenant, i.e. the ORC, who is contributing $5-7 million towards the fit out and operation of the building. I mean, that's what's in the budget for the long-term plan. Is that correct?
Yes, that is in the budget for the long-term plan, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't agree that it's unusual that the landlord's doing the work.
No, I didn't say that.
No.
It's unusual for the tenant to contribute $7 million to the fit out.
No, I don't agree that either.
I could answer that question, but you'd have to kill me.
Well, I can answer that question for buildings in Wellington.
Well, it's not unusual. If you look at this floor here, it's exactly what happened when we moved in here. That we moved in, and this floor was basically in the process of being refurbed. A total fit out of this floor was done, of which some of it the landlord was paying for, and some of it we were paying for. So the landlord was paying for all the lighting and HVAC and everything like that. This building here, the port is taking a shell of a warehouse and is going to convert it into office space. Yeah. So there'll be a portion of that is their cost of refurbing that whole building into an office. Yeah, there's still a portion then once that's taken to that point, we still come in and we have to do all of our fit out, i.e. fixtures and furnishing and fixtures and fittings and all of that. That's what the $5 million is for.
So it's a fixtures and furnishings.
That's what we've budgeted for in the LTP. It's assuming that the port's going to get the building to a point that we could move in.
Okay.
So there's a whole portion that they have to do to take it from what it currently is as a warehouse to turn it into an office building.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And then that's what we lease from them.
So the next question I have is this one, and it's to do with the representation of governance. The search, I think, is $8 million plus to get to here. It's no criticism of anybody sitting around this table. It's just the way it happened. It's an unfortunate waste of money, but it's gone now.
Well, that's not entirely true.
Either.
Oh,
You know.
I'll put it on record. I think it's an entire waste of money.
What's that? Sorry.
I think Nick's talking
the
about.
$8 million.
No, for goodness sake, we've got an asset down at the harbour side there. Get
Can
your
we just
facts
have one
right,
at a
sir.
time, please? Hang on.
Brian,
Hang
you
on.
blew it.
Please.
Anyhow.
Michael, no, Michael, please hold. Thank you.
Can we move on with this
Please.
project?
Nick,
I'm asking the question.
Okay,
No,
I'm just
you're
trying
not.
to
You're
get clarification for
false
you.
accusations.
It's not a false argument. Honestly,
Michael.
only you understood the English language, Brian.
Please, Michael, please. Now,
So you're right about that, actually.
the $8 million.
Just trying to write a block.
Can we just
Don't
have
make me
clarification around, or whatever the number is, that it incorporates the cost of purchase or the cost of fit out or whatever. It's not a whole lot, not millions of dollars that were wasted on, I don't know, investigations of various properties that may or may not suit our requirements going into the future. So are you able to just, with that number, you've got X amount on the building reserve fund, correct?
Yes.
I don't understand what number we're talking about.
No,
Because
okay.
we're talking about $5 million in the LTP for doing a fit out.
No, I was just referring to Michael suggested.
Oh,
we've
the
wasted-
No,
we've wasted-
but the question I'm asking is, it's the $5 million is in the year one, I think, is that, or is it year two?
Two.
And then there's $2 million in year three.
Yep. So there's the numbers in the LTP that are in the paper is there's $5 million for the fit out in Dunedin.
Yep.
We've got another $2 million in the third year for doing property, for whatever we might do property wise in Central Otago.
Okay.
And there's we've also got included in the LTP $2 million of rental costs.
Okay, so that's 9
And we'll also have two.
No, $2 million per annum.
per annum.
Yeah, for rental costs.
Yeah, yeah.
You pay
And
every year, not just once.
We'll also have two assets that we no
Selling.
longer require, which would be the
Yep.
Stafford Street site and the Birch Kitchener site. And if you factor those in, you'd be on the upside rather than cost neutral.
And they were in the LTP that we've assumed that we will be selling the properties, so Birch Kitchener and Stafford Street, once we've moved head office location.
We haven't put those into the LTP yet, though, have we?
Yes, we have.
No, sorry, we haven't put the amount of money that we're expecting to get from the sale into the LTP, have we? We've indicated that we're going to sell them, but
No.
we actually haven't given an estimation as to what we would expect to get from the sale of them.
Oh, we did.
And
We
how
put it-
much is that?
I'd have to double check, but we put amounts in year 4, I believe. Yeah.
Really?
I can't.
So how does that
No,
compare with the
can you
8 million?
remember, Brian?
Yeah.
No,
Just-
you can't.
can we
Stay out
just
of
have-
conversation?
Can we just have one at a time, Michael? Next
So the
question.
question I'm asking, but also there's the building fund that we've been levying rates for God knows how long.
Mhm.
How much money's in there?
So the building reserve going into this year had I think about $13 or $14 million. So what we've done is we've left the $7 million for the fit out costs. Yeah. The 5 and the 2 for Central Otago, and the rest has been transferred to general reserve to pay for the basically for the rates offset in the previous financial year, and for the excess deficit that we created. So effectively, the building reserve has gone, except for the 5 and the 2 for the fit out costs. Then in year 4, we're assuming that the building reserve, the money from the sale of the properties will go back into, it'll go into back into general reserve. And then we're assuming that we'd increase our managed fund, and the increase in the managed fund, the return on the managed fund, would help pay the increased rental cost.
Right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to know how much we're expecting though to get from the sale of both those properties.
Well, I think
Yeah, I'd have to go and double
probably
check.
something that we would want to also discuss.
Yeah, I'd have to go and double check what we put in, but I think we were quite conservative with it. The thing you've got to remember is we don't know how much we might get, particularly for a building like Stafford Street, where we don't know where the market might be.
Yeah.
So it is only we included getting realising those assets, and I'm pretty sure it was in year 4. So basically, by the time you roll round into the next LTP, we'll have certainty around those numbers, and that can be factored in. But what we have assumed is that those proceeds go into general reserve. We'll reinvest that money, and we'll use the return on the investment to help offset the rental costs that will be coming because of the $2 million per annum.
Okay. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, the only comment I'd like to make is like we've been talking about getting 1 or 2 governance representatives on the steering group, say 10 people, and you've got all these. Have we got like a general statement in terms of our expectation of the fit out? You know, like yeah, sure, the port is the owner. We own the port, but at the end of the day, we're looking at this as potentially as a medium to long-term home. Previously, we've sort of got trapped up about certain standards, green standards, all this type of thing. But it would be, you know, like Hilary has rightfully said that one of the risks is finance, but there's also the risk that we want a home that that is an appropriate home. And even a one-line sort of sentence to whether it comes from the steering group, it comes from the CEO, or whether it comes from governance, to say, well, this is the type of standard that we're after, as opposed to the port, you know, making that assessment themselves. The port are very good at doing warehouses. The port are very good at these types of things. This is outside their specialty, if I'm allowed to say that, unless somebody can point out a similar example. But all I'm saying is to make a statement like that, I think would actually help our representative, our governance representative, and their CE, I would have thought, you know, that we have some agreement about what we're aiming for. Or maybe the CE would like to reply to that in terms of...
I can.
Cool.
Look,
Thanks, Sarah.
I mean, in initial conversations that we've had, I've
Yeah.
been very sensitive to the fact that we don't want a Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's really important. It has to be appropriate in terms of the look and feel. We're not at this stage anyway. We're not proposing any kind of massive changes to the outside. We do need to put in some windows.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't you want some windows?
Yeah, we have to put in some windows. But I mean, you know, the cladding on the outside actually is quite good, quite a good standard and all the rest of it. So potentially, you know, we wouldn't be looking to do that. The only 2 kind of key speculations that we've talked about design-wise are, you know, in Stafford Street at the moment, half the staff are roasting and the rest of them are sitting in puffer jackets because they're freezing. So good HVAC is really important, you know, especially for a climate like here. That's important. Good ventilation is important. And also, you know, light and not having too much exposed concrete, making it too dark. We've talked about the green building thing. what costs you with the green building thing is not just what you put in, but it's also the registration or the licensing of the green building and achieving that. We're mindful that we should be sustainable and where we can be, but we wouldn't necessarily think we need to seek the status of being a 5 or 6 star building, for example.
Will the CE come back with sort of a statement of intent, just like what you're articulating here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a role for the steering committee, and what we have coming up in early November is the designers are coming down. Yeah. And there will be some initial conversations, a little bit of canvassing of staff to understand, the things that are important to them, and then also some conversations with us. And I think that's the time in those initial scoping conversations that a statement could be made. But I think, we're very cognizant of the fact that it's not just our space. It's Otago's space.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. So it's got to have some style around the community interface, surely.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we have our mana whenua partners involved.
Yeah.
Because Toitu, obviously, is a very significant part of Dunedin for mana whenua. And so having that cultural narrative is important. So we have that opportunity.
Sorry, the Toitui stream.
Yeah.
Just underneath there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really a significant part of Dunedin. So, we've already had some of those conversations.
Cool.
Yeah, look, I think we're really mindful. We've got a lot of bluestone in the building itself and the heritage parts. So I think trying to think about how we make the best of that is important, but we also have some challenges, and one of those is we need to provide an IL4 component of the building for our civil defence function. So we do need to be mindful of that, and that's possibly going to be a bit of a challenge, and might require us to think a little bit more broadly.
But like fundamentally, you might say, look, fundamentally it's going to be maximise open plan, this type of stuff.
Absolutely, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about, open plan. We're not talking about traditional small offices.
Yeah.
But we're also talking about how we organise, the building so that we are able to respond to things like pandemics relatively easily, that we are able to have the space we need for staff to be able to Zoom. At the moment, they hunch around their computers and, open plan offices with headphones in, and that's not ideal. So there's those sorts of things that we need to consider. At the moment we have staff with mountains of gear, like just tons of stuff that they keep basically beside their desks, and, I'd like to think that we would be able to store that more appropriately. So, what I'm talking about is a very functional space.
Oh,
thanks for that, Brian. Can I just clarify, Sarah, a couple of things? An IL4, I assume, is like a bunker, is it?
No, IL4 is a piece of building that's kind of like stronger and can stand alone. So it has an independent sort of water system, and it has independent power and stuff.
Yeah. I think the discussions highlighted, some loose ends that will in time find a home, and when you consider the leasehold costs and you consider fit out costs, where those numbers haven't landed, we just don't know exactly what that looks like in terms of the standards, etc. We've now got a verbal description of what Sarah's asking for from a design point of view, etc. So you can understand, I think politically there is a considerable amount of interest from us to be kept up to speed as this project progresses to eventually, opening as the new head office in, end of 2022 or whatever. I'm not sure where I was heading. Marion, sorry.
Thank you. Can I just, Brian, just draw to your viewpoint And you go towards the end of the paper and it talks about considerations and it talks about climate change considerations, puts in there sustainability will be a consideration in the accommodation fit out, and then it goes to schedule a meeting with councillors and the designers as part of the initial scoping discussions.
Cool.
So that doesn't all have to happen today, and report regularly to council. The question I want to ask, and it's an historical question, Andrew, and you might be able to. A lot of people have talked about money spent in the past. When was that past? Was it, where are we now? 1921, was it? 1918, 1917? When was this past when this money got spent? Does anyone know? In choosing a place that seems to hang around some councillors' necks.
Is that a question for you, Nick?
Well,
When was it?
well, sort of. I think what everybody's referring to is what the ODT reported. And quite frankly, you know, I never responded to those, but what they reported was a load of rubbish.
Okay, when was that?
Well, they're talking about going back to the original decision to buy the Birch Kitchener site and what happened from spend from then on.
Yeah.
But they added the cost of buying that land. You've got to remember that council went through a process to go right through a design process up to the point of almost to where the decision to award the contract, and then council decided not to proceed. So I also hear around here that seems to be a view that the finances, that governance needs to be involved at an operational level because somehow staff are the ones spending the money.
Okay,
but council is the one who has made these decisions. The other thing that that the ODT misreported was that, for example, they reported the money spent fitting out this floor, an operational cost of providing space for council and staff, as some sort of head office investigation cost, same as building the chamber down at Stafford Street. So there was a lot of misreporting and misrepresentation went on in the numbers that have been reported publicly and then in turn re-reported or re-quoted by numerous people, including councillors around this table, and quite incorrectly.
Thank you, love. That is what, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on.
Can I complete that?
Can I just respond to what you've just said, Nick? I think politically we've got a responsibility. Politically, governments have a responsibility to be accountable to the community. So, from our perspective, that's what we're looking at here, is trying to have an involvement that sort of meets the community's expectations. So we know what's going on. We know the outcome, whether it's financially or what it's going to look like in terms of its form and function, etc. So it's just a role that councillors need to play, in my view. Sorry, Marion.
So then that's what I want to come back at. I've only been on this council 2 years. I heard about this as something in the past. I don't know whether you, Sarah, were CE at the time. But
Not for most of it.
For what?
Not for most of it.
Okay.
No, not at all.
So what I've seen is probably the cleverest sidestep I've ever seen in getting the port to take up the ownership. And I've never seen anything quite so politically clever in my life. And I don't think around this table of us that we're as clever as the blessed staff in managing what actually happens in terms of it. That's why I'll support Gretchen.
Thank you. So where are we at? We've got a motion on the table that Councillor Malcolm is appointed to the internal steering group. That's where we're currently at. So if there are no more questions, we'll go and deal with that. Michael, is that a question?
Sure, there's no more questions.
Is there any?
No.
You haven't?
No,
so
but
you're speaking to the motion?
Speaking to the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you.
First of all, no problems with Kevin. And in actual fact, another string to his bow is that he is currently very heavily involved in the $20 million plus project to deliver a sports amenity to Waitaki, without the facility of being able to call on ratepayers to fund that. So he will certainly have a great deal of project management experience in terms of building. So no difficulty with that. When it comes to the second councillor, though, I'm very clear on this, and I think it is the responsibility of the chair. You are the chairman of council. This is a major item of expenditure. To reply to Mr. Donnelly, the Otago Daily Times reported it wasn't $8 million. Sorry, got that wrong, Brian. It was $10 million. And they had gleaned that information from a local government official information request to the Otago Regional Council that asked, in actual fact, what was the cost spent related to the building on land purchases, site assessments and temporary office space? And they were told that the total amount was $9.7 million and that information was provided in 2018 by the Otago Regional Council.
And that included some assets.
It doesn't make any difference. I'm just telling you where the figure came from.
Yeah,
and
I'm
what
telling
the
you what I
reporting
mean.
was.
Hang on, just
Okay?
one at a time, please.
So I'm just explaining to you what the figure was and what this reporting was at the Otago Daily Times at the time, which is why that impression is abroad. And that is real money that was spent, whether it was on assets or not, it's real money that was spent. Going back to you though, you're here. Now, we're talking about an urban-rural issue. I think if it's going to be an urban councillor, then the chair is the appropriate person, given the expenditure.
So the motion at the
So
moment
I would
is-
nominate, well, I think the two people that should be going on it should be Kevin Malcolm and the chair, whoever it might be.
I'm
Now, the
prepared
next
to amend
election-
my second part of my motion, if that's the.
Yep. And then we cover it all. We cover the governance, we cover the urban-rural divide, and we cover people who have responsibility to this council and to governance.
Okay, so I need to go to the seconder of the motion.
I think it was me, no, was it?
Yes, yeah, so you seconded the first motion.
Oh, I did.
Kevin?
Okay, look, I'm perfectly happy for it to be the chair, okay? Chair and Kevin. There's a consensus. Note.
Okay.
Yes. And between you and.
Are there any further
unusual.
speakers?
Working hard, ladies.
Okay.
Very.
If there are no further speakers, I'll put the two motions, the recommendation that we note the report and we appoint councillors Malcolm and Noon to the internal steering group. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Nick. Moving on to item 7.6. Welcome, Gary. Sorry about the delay.
Jid's a slice from home.
You're going to be here a lot.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Welcome, Gavin. Apologies for the delay. So this item 7.6, Queenstown Public Transport Business Case. And there's also the attachment, the business case scoping plan, which has been included. And this is a report to seek approval of the Queenstown Public Transport Business Case. And remembering back in February, Strategy and Planning received a report on the Queenstown Transport Business Case and made the following recommendations. Endorsed in principle the Queenstown Business Case as the basis for more detailed investigation subject to a long-term plan consultation process. The recommendations are that we note the report and that we approve the scope of the Queenstown Public Transport Business Case as described in the appended Queenstown Public Transport Business Case scoping paper. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Is there anything you want to comment on, Gary?
Happy to answer questions.
Happy to
Mr.
answer
Chairman.
questions. I think the justification for the business case is covered off in paragraphs 8, 9, 10 and 11. And because Alexa isn't here, I should just make a brief comment about the Queenstown situation has been for a long time in terms of transport challenges, but the last TAG group or Transport Governance Group, Transport Governance Group that met probably a couple of weeks ago and discussed the Ladies Mile master plan. And it just reminded me of how Queenstown, with its substantive growth and challenges in the transport space, the only solutions are mode shift, and clearly public transport plays a massive part in trying to achieve that mode shift. And I think the number was, and it's in the report somewhere, a 40% shift from vehicles to other modes, including public transport by 2028. So that's a massive challenge, and obviously we're part of that challenge. So one of the steps clearly is for this business case to progress and hopefully be successful. But are there any questions for Gavin, Gary, or someone like to move? Brian?
Yeah, my question was, look, I didn't spend a lot of time reading this report, but what are you really wanting from us on this report? Because it seemed to me that a period of time ago, we agreed to the scope in principle. Now time has gone by, you've fleshed it out a little bit. You just want reaffirmation that we're on board, because there's not a lot more information, is there? Or is there a cost thing? You know, like how much are we putting up, or is it just consistent with the LTP? What are you wanting from the council with this report?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So the scoping report, the business case that we're wanting to get off the ground, builds on the work of the Queenstown Transport business case, which said we've got a real issue with State Highway 6A. The solution, as the chairman said, is around getting mode shift.
But we've already agreed to that, haven't we?
You've said you've agreed with there's a need to do some work around that.
Yeah.
This is the fleshing out of, okay, if we're to do our bit around mode shift, what is that going to take? What's it going to cost? What are the benefits of doing that so that, you know, you get at the end of this process? So this is, if you like, the case for investing in extra bus services, extra infrastructure, or not investing.
Yeah. So you gave us a work program there, and how much is it going to cost?
So the business case has been costed at $1.5 million.
And we're paying half of it.
Paying half of it.
Cool. And they're going to do the business case, and that's going to take, how long is that going to take?
So we're looking at it as a 2-year process, hoping to get it done in time. Well, no, not hoping. We will get it done in time to do your next long-term plan.
Okay, so what you want from us is to sign off $2 million in the time frame to do the business case.
So you've already agreed to the funding and the long-term plan.
Yeah.
It's what your level of comfort is with what we're proposing to do in the extra business case work here.
Cool. Thank you.
Kate, then Kevin.
I appreciate that we have got funding to do this stuff. I'm really concerned, given where I think the COVID effects are, whether this is the best time to make assumptions on what is going to be the needs of Queenstown. And I appreciate the traffic issues there still. But while this is a process we've started and it's in the LTP, and that may be why the report is here, if you thought that this wasn't the best thing to be happening now because of that timing, would you be telling us that? Well, I don't want to get on sorry, in that context, and I'm not trying to be mischievous, I don't want to be that mouse on the wheel that just keeps on spinning, because that's what we've...
Yeah.
Cool. So, yes, we've been impacted by COVID, and that's certainly impacted Queenstown, and you've seen that in the data we've brought to you. It will come back. I mean, while tourists, you haven't got overseas tourists coming into the centre at the moment, of course, you've still got that growth happening of the community. I think it's the right time to do this work. One of the things that we'll do is look at, so the higher level business case said by 2024, for example, we need to invest in X, 2027, a much higher step up. This work will look further and examine that and look at that timing.
Can I, a subsequent question? I'm comfortable if, in planning this, the assumptions are, and I think this is where it's going in the scoping report, that the assumptions aren't just about tourism or international tourism, but it is about and it talks about mode shift, and I get that we're really trying to deal with that growth and for their local community, rather than being driven by anything about people coming on planes and stuff like that, because
So through you, Mr. Chairman, one of the key pieces of work that feeds into this is the spatial plan up there.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not just about tourism, that's about the growing with residents.
Last question. Yeah. Okay. Last question. Given all of the changes of COVID, and that you've got an up, not only growth in Queenstown, but in the local community in Wanaka, is this still the best thing we can be doing and the best use of our money to for the ratepayers, both in Dunedin and Queenstown Lakes District area, as far as bus and mode shift goes?
My view is that it is. You've currently got a service in Queenstown that's going to have to grow over time. You haven't in Wanaka. There is a demand in Wanaka. We're doing some work with QLDC staff to look at how we become part of their next stage of their business case work in the Upper Clutha. So that'll be around transport active modes, but also it will pull on the public transport part of that. You perhaps might have seen in the scope, we recognise there's some other demands. Glenorchy's mentioned.
Yeah.
And so what we're suggesting there is that might be something you consider in your next LTP round around how you give effect to that.
So this won't be included in this and can't be included in this?
It won't plan, for example, a Glenorchy service. It'll think about how that might impact the area of the business case, but as I say, it won't do that detailed planning for Glenorchy.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, get on with it. Look, I just talking to some absolute transport experts, and I put you in that same pile there, so don't panic. Actually, Queenstown offers us the opportunity to go electric and to ensure mode shift by setting barriers, and it's the perfect spot to actually do it. And that's why I think as you're doing your assumptions, please hook into Wakatahae. Make sure you get their money and plenty of it, because simply they really should be the leading light for the whole of New Zealand. I think Queenstown could be that. In the mode change, look, it actually should be irrelevant to COVID. We've just got to do it because emissions are there regardless of COVID anyway. So we need the mode change. But you do say this decarbonisation by is 2025 that to bring on no more new buses. So that's by 2025. So I would ask Mr. Wakatahae to front up with those buses right at the start, but just have your barriers in place. But so I was meant to ask a question, wasn't I?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
So you're happy that you're going to get there? Sorry about that. I should have left that for the debate part, but I think get into it.
Thanks, Kevin. Question, is it Marion?
It is a
Apologies,
question.
Chair. All good.
Is that right?
Cool.
This is called a QT, it's public transport, isn't it? So you won't be able to put in a case for a blessed cycle bridge. Do you know what I'm going to say? Between the school and those two big suburbs for the kids to bike there.
Good point. So Queenstown Lakes, working with the Transport Agency, has already done its active travel network business case work and planning, and out of that, there's become some issues in terms of costs for parts of that network, and that's a struggle at the moment. This is just about public transport.
No, this is supposed to be public transport,
hang on,
cycling and walking. That's what it says from the start.
Just let Gary answer the question, please.
So it's a public transport business case that will take account around how it connects with active modes and others. It won't plan those active modes. That's not the role of this piece of work.
Okay.
Thank you. You're all good, Marion. Michael?
So I need you to clarify for a bit more, because I think we might be wasting our money if we don't look at that issue. Marion's absolutely right that the growth of, as you know, Queenstown is south of that bridge. Well, sort of west of that bridge, I guess. No, it's east, isn't it? East of
Then on the other side of Ladies Mile.
Ladies Mile.
Yeah, Ladies Mile, exactly. Well, that might not go ahead at the moment, but nevertheless, that's where the growth will occur. And that bridge is the issue. And if you are trying to encourage walking and particularly cycling, the impediment is that there is no way to cross the Shotover River by bike other than risk yourself. So surely that would be a critical part of any public transport plan you'd do, wouldn't it be?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, because that's not public transport. That's a separate piece of work that has been done both through the Queenstown Transport Business Case and also through the active transport network.
So you mean you're defining transport as motorised transport?
Public is public.
Yeah.
Well, the public, you would think
The important thing, Michael, was the work has actually been done by Queenstown Lakes and Wakakatahi.
We're talking about service provision. Service provision.
Just want to check with Gary.
Public transport service. So giving you some.
Are you comfortable, Gary, with in terms of nothing else you want to add to your last answer? Brian?
Yeah, like it says, what's the QTBC?
Sorry,
Queenstown Business
so that's the Queenstown Transport Business Case, which was the amalgam of two larger pieces of work that they brought into one.
Yeah, and what it says is the QTBC outlines the case for investment from a suite of multimodal transport interventions covering the Whakatipu Basin over the next 30 years. The approach focuses on targeted bus priority and walking and cycling infrastructure improvements, bus rapid transport services and travel behaviour initiatives to reduce growth in the private car use.
And in the regional land transport plan, they took out the walking and cycling.
Oh, well, I'm not voting for it. No.
Is that what you said? That's what you were saying.
Okay.
If you can't sort that out at the start, this is so fundamental.
No, we need to be really, really clear that investigation work has been completed. And we're talking about walking and cycling here and connectivity. And our focus, as Gary has alluded to, is public transport. There are other parties that are dealing with those other modes, and that work has already been completed.
But didn't Gary intimate that there were issues with the cycling and the walking in the basin, and we're throwing money at it, and those issues aren't being addressed? If I misinterpreted that, Gary?
I'm not sure whether that was the inference.
So sorry, the acronyms are not really helpful because we've got Queenstown and we've got PT in there. So if I go back to the start, the piece of work that we will do was identified in this higher Wakatipu Basin thing called the Queenstown Transport Business Case.
Yeah.
That looked at the whole basin.
Sorry, Gary. That was a joint piece of work, wasn't it?
We were party to it. We didn't fund it. It was a joint piece of work between Queenstown Lakes and the Transport Agency, recognising that State Highway 6 and 6A had some real issues. Out of that came the way of dealing with those issues to get mode shift, because we're not going to build any more black stuff. It helped get funding through the NZ Up program, the $150 million that's going in there. Out of that, it said, so as part of what we need to do, we need to invest heavily in public transport. We don't know what the detail of that is. You go away and do a public transport business case to flesh that detail out. And so that's what this is about.
Gavin.
Just wonder, Mr. Chairman, if we bring a paper back to the appropriate committee which explains that suite of business cases, of which this is one, and where all these different bits are living in terms of that business case development to provide the assurance that it's a complete system approach. And this is dealing with part of it, an important part.
Thank you.
We can do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm happy to move recommendations 1 and 2 by a seconder.
Yep.
Seconded by Marion.
Yep.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll put both those motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Is that Gretchen or Carmen? Oh, thanks, Gretchen. Thanks, Carmen.
Yep, welcome.
Okay. Moving on to item 7.7. Welcome, Gavin. So this is a report to update council on the arrangements between ORC and DCC for the delivery of the South Dunedin Harbourside Natural Hazards Adaptation Program of Work. And this complements the updated or comments that I made in my last chairperson's report on the 29th of September, which followed a meeting with Sarah, yourself, and I met with Mayor Hawkins and CEO Graham. Gavin, is there anything you would like to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'll take it as read and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Gavin? Brian.
Now, on the 1st of December 2020, it's the end of last year, we voted, we had a choice of various options in terms of what type of governance an operational work structure we wanted for South Dunedin and the harbour side. And out of that, I think we selected either option 2 or option 3. Whereas it seemed where basically I think we've got a situation where the ORC staff are involved in the project, but there's very little involvement in the ORC governance. And it seems to me that if the ORC is going to be one team, staff and governance working effectively together, then that isn't an acceptable situation. So why have we not moved to implementing option 2 or 3 as agreed?
That's a fair question, Brian. And you know, we've had a meeting with, as I said, with Mayor Hawkins and CEO Graham, and clearly, you know, at this stage, we haven't come to an agreement in terms of an overarching governance lens, so to speak. But I think it's important to recognise that that staff have a close working relationship, a collaborative approach, with the focus obviously on the technical work. And so we still have a desire to show greater leadership from a governance perspective in the future of South Dunedin. So the way I see it is that the question for the city hasn't gone away from us, but at this point we are receiving updates via Gavin, who receives an update from that staff member who is jointly funded by both organisations that covers off the snapshot work, I think was the term that was used in the report, which essentially brings us up to speed in terms of the current state assessment, etc. So we haven't got what we asked for, Brian, I accept that, but equally there's some good work going on between, as I say, both organisations at a staff level, and that's working really, really well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that joint staff arrangement where both organisations fund that particular person. So we have stepped in the right direction.
Though to be fair, we don't. It seems to me we don't really know whether it's working really well. It seems to me there's a lot of potential that's unfulfilled. If we truly are one team, should we withdraw our staff from this project?
Well, I mean, I personally wouldn't support that approach. I think
should we give our staff to the DCC if they want our staff?
No, but I think it's important to remember from our perspective. We've got responsibilities in the natural hazard space. Clearly, that's why natural hazards adaptation. That's sort of one of our core business responsibilities. So we must deliver in that space. Although we're not getting the coordination at governance level, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think the important thing is that there's a focus on South Dunedin, I think everyone around this table believes there's a great future in South Dunedin, and if the city and ORC are both investing in South Dunedin, to me that's a pretty positive action.
Well, I would just ask the chair and this council and the CE to continue dialogue for the betterment of the project. I think we've proven in other parts of Otago, Glenorchy, Milton, some of these other areas, that this is core business for this council.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other query, Kevin?
Just the reporting back of the effectiveness of this position. Where do we see that? What would be that process?
Mr. Chair, do you mean, Councillor Malcolm, do you mean through the program manager, how that reports back to council?
How does, and the effect of what he's actually trying to achieve? How do we, what's his KPIs, or what's the project's KPIs around that? How are we going to know if he's getting somewhere?
Well, we'll be reporting on where the program is going. We'll do that through our quarterly reporting on annual plan. We have targets. We'll also be providing the reports as we do at the minute on South Dunedin through the appropriate committee, strategy and planning or implementation. So that will be the mechanism. The other thing I would say is after we've done the stock take, we will then move to preparing a more detailed project plan than we've had in the past. And in that project plan, we'll have objectives, targets and the like, and those things will be reported to both councils.
Sarah did just remind me that discussion we did have. Clearly, there was a suggestion once those budgets were starting to be worked through the city's annual plan budgets, etc. There was a suggestion that that staff member would provide some update, whether that came through Gavin or whatever, in terms of financial planning going forward.
I think it was also that he would present to
Correct.
this group.
Correct.
Just in terms of progress.
Thank you.
Before the end of the year.
Good. Hilary.
I can understand the further development of a program and all those, and I think it's a good idea that we get together with the DCC about it and things. I'm just wondering about the next step where it says oversee the program of work, that we don't have any sort of, the connections aren't quite there properly, that person doesn't account to us, they're a DCC employee. So I'm just trying to get together not just how they report later, because certainly Gavin can report to us about what's going on, but how about what if we don't want it to be going on, or how about if we want to have some input into the program or something? It's sort of like it's just disappeared off out there somewhere, and it's reported to back about what somebody's doing rather than what input we have into where they're going or what they're doing. I'm just sort of trying to get my head around where the control things are, and where they do they just come back and say, oh, there's another 100 grand to be put into that fund in our long-term plan or something, because that's what the program manager and the committee have decided now, or what sort of do we get to approve the program that he's overseeing? If it's a he.
It's a he. Yep.
That he is overseeing. Does it come back to us, or?
Gavin, are you able to?
The answer is yes. Yeah. What we have at the moment are a number of projects being delivered by both councils. What the program will do and what the program manager will do will ensure that those things are coordinated in time and what is happening. So the accountabilities for ensuring those individual projects are delivered still remain with respective councils and managers and this council. The program manager is ensuring that there is the oversight across the projects, that reporting is actually occurring at a program level, and that information will come back. As I said, there's three parts to this. The first is the stock take that's underway at the moment, and that will come back to you next month, and the program manager will come and talk to you about that. Then we'll move to preparing the project plan, and we'll bring that back to you for approval and endorsement, because there'll be parts of that.
Excellent. So
yeah, absolutely.
So that would come back.
That comes back. Yep.
And presumably it comes back as we want to put this in the annual plan.
Well, we've already got things in the long-term plan. Project plan may propose some new things, and we'll need to work through that in terms of a change control process with next year's annual plan and the LTP after that. But certainly that project plan will come back to you for endorsement and approval with objectives and targets that we will report against.
And so I'd hope to see that the program that comes back to us comes back and feeds into our annual plan process, because
correct. It will.
Yeah.
And
because
that's the
otherwise, so then we can say, if somebody came back to us, we could say, we've put 150 grand of our money in, and this is what's going to happen to it, and this is what projects carried out, and the DCC will be able to say the same thing at their end with their annual plan, and the project manager will report back on how they spent that money that we've both agreed to in our annual plans. Is that sort of,
Yep.
is my little vision all right?
I think so.
Excellent.
Cool. Any further discussion? I'm not sure. I can't remember whether these have been moved or not, but I will move.
I'm comfortable to move both.
Yep. Okay.
It's the on
You'll move
page
1 to
217.
4. I will second. Question, is it, or discussion?
Yeah.
I just already done. Sorry. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the 4 recommendations. Actually, before I do, Gavin, I just wanted to pick up on 2 things. One, noting that you were looking at that same pathway process that was used for Glenorchy in terms of dynamic adaptive pathway process for decision making from a consultation and making some pretty important decisions going forward. And the other point I picked up in there was the Otago Uni School of Surveying, their involvement with the improved monitoring, with the past vertical movement situation. So that's good to have them on board as well. Well done. I'll put those 2 recommendations. Sorry, I was in the wrong part of the paper. Yeah, 2 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks very much, Gavin. Moving on to the recommendations adopted at committee meetings. So this is strategy and planning. Kate, your move.
Yes.
Council adopts resolution of the 13th of October 2021 strategy and planning committee, seconded by Gretchen. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. 8.2, Otago South and Regional Transport Committee recommendations. You'll move, Kate, that the council adopts the resolution of the 1st of October 2021 Otago and Southern Regional Transport Committee. I'll second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to chairpersons and chief executives report 9.1. I'm happy to move that we note the report. Are there any questions, queries? Seconded by Michael. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. CE's report. I'll move that we note this report. Seconded by Michael. No discussion. If not, I'll put the motion.
Can I just ask one question? The meeting with Wanaka Wanaka, just wondering where that was. Is that here or out there?
It was here.
Thank you.
It was initiated by Mandy and Julie. They were in town for other matters and rushed to come and see me.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. That concludes the public part of this meeting. I'll now move that the public be excluded under Lagoima section 48(1)A from the discussions of the following items for items per the ground for public exclusion table as set out in the audit paper. Just before everyone leaves, thank you very much for your contribution. And we've got 2 items, minutes of the 29th September council meeting, non-public council meeting, and the Chief Executive's Performance Review Committee report back. And just noting that, thank you, Kate, that Doug Craig remains in the room for item 3.1. I'll move, seconded, Kate. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Thank you. We still have a quorum, don't we?
It's